Find the grounds to impeach him on.
Yeah. Hey, either that or he knows we don't want to get rid of him. Yeah. Sign, be official, sir. Oh. Yeah, I got my license with.
Well, hey, Steve called me and told me about texting. I'm so good, so far, so good.
Oh,
It tells you something.
the guy. Totally.
I'll be right there when you got it.
Yeah.
How can I help you? Hey, what's up?
Get away from you.
Well, I was so worried about that rotor. You're calling this an event.
It's like, and once that's done,
Are you impacting the runway?
rotated in. It's not
Are
like
you impacting the runway? About the taxiway.
They say it's gonna be done by
Are you impacting the apron in such a way that
Yeah, they have. But it's been a hard.
send me what you have, just so I can have it on record, but
on email.
using the word event, I guess it's a new trigger word now. So
Is Lou's going to be here?
you can use the word event, but it doesn't fall
So
into
that's a signature right
the
there.
category that
Right here.
affecting airspace. Just send it to me.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with Louise.
We can call him. She put a mic next to the.
Mr. Klingel, sir,
So we can
can we impose upon you for your signature?
Oh, certainly.
And if somebody could give me back my pen, I'd greatly appreciate it.
I just didn't however you want to do it.
There's got to be a benefit to sitting over here.
Yes.
Well, then, who's gonna, he's gonna call me?
Nope, that's it.
License registration, would you hand this to today, please? Thank you.
Does he want to be there from the beginning or just when his part is?
I think he needs to be listening to the whole part of this presentation.
Okay, so have the mic next to,
Sorry? I drank it, yeah. Wasn't enough of it.
oh, I did actually.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
Oh crap, we're behind, we're late. It's terrible.
This is the first time you're late.
Do you have his?
I know, right?
My hunting license. Got a pilot's license.
386 295 9050. That looks like you. All right.
Hey, Michael, you should be called back.
Good afternoon, everybody. Happy Pi Day. I hope everybody brought your best long set of significant digits for Pi today. The person that's got the most amount of significant digits wins the prize, which is 2 donuts instead of just 1. Please help yourselves. There's coffee, there's donuts. We may be running short of cups, but there's a ton of coffee in there and plenty of donuts left. Anyway, thank you so much for coming today. I see we have a full house. I therefore hereby call this March meeting of the Citrus County Aviation Advisory Board to order. If I could impose upon you all, please just stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Ms. Jenkins, did we not see 2 meetings ago you were joined by somebody else that was in line to replace you?
Apparently, I'm not that easy to get rid of.
I heard that.
So, here I stay.
Here you stay. Yay, very nicely done. That being the case, would you be so good as to let us know who's here and who's not?
Absolutely. Today in attendance, we have Carl Flanagan,
Present.
Mark Klingel,
Here.
our new member, Gene Davis, Charles Carr,
Here.
and Chairman Heiko Pallenbaugh.
Present.
Absent, I am showing Louise Michaels and George McDonald.
Thank you very much. Did we hear from Luis at all?
I haven't, I don't
We heard from George, he's out of town. Hope Luis is okay. In any case, so we do have a new member of the AAB that just joined us this month, was appointed by the Board of County Commissioners, Mr. Gene Davis. Gene, would you please stand and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Long story.
A little bit.
Yeah, no, I was raised here in Citrus County, learned to fly some 60 years ago when Inverness was a grass strip. I'm a private pilot, instrument pilot, rotor wing pilot, so I've kind of done a little bit of everything, but I'm looking forward to working with you on it. I also sit on the Inverness City Council Board, so I'm looking forward to working with everybody and learning everybody here.
I understand the volume of your propeller is not as loud as that of an airboat.
You're right.
Very well, thank you very much. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes from last month's meeting? If so, may I have a motion, please, to approve those minutes? Charlie, second by Mark. Discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Last month's minutes are approved. Before we throw things open to the public, and thank you so much for everybody showing an interest in coming by today, we're going to be talking about some things that are going to affect both airports today. So there may be there will be more opportunity for you to speak at the end of the meeting about some of the things that you hear presented today. So bear that in mind. That being said, I throw the meeting open. Does anybody from the public like to say anything? Yes, ma'am. Since we've never seen you before, would you please state your name for the record?
Diane Paquette, I live on Flight Path in Crystal River.
Thank you, ma'am.
Right on the airport runway. The last meeting that I attended, Dr. Byers gave a presentation and made recommendations, and I was just wondering what the procedure is for implementing those recommendations. Does it go before the board, or do you make recommendations based on what he gave you? I was just wondering what the procedure was.
So it's funny you should ask that.
That's-
Today, we're going to be going over his presentation. Basically, we've boiled it down to specifically his goals and recommendations. And so we're going to be going over each of these. Today, the AAB will. And discussing it, we've got Mr. Daniel Elsey, the gentleman who hired Dr. Byers to perform the study. He's going to be here to provide us his perspective. We also have representatives from Wright Rudder and a Crystal Air Group here to speak on behalf of the FBOs. So we're going to be going over recommendation one by one and discussing it amongst ourselves. At next month's meeting, we will, as a board, be voting on line item, if necessary, line by line item, on whether we approve or disapprove of those. And we will then be presenting all of that in a workshop in May to the Board of County Commissioners, who will then have the final say on what happens.
So I should have waited till the end of the meeting instead of-
Not a problem. It's always lovely to see you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Sir?
Yes, hello. I just want to introduce myself. I'm Ray Moore. I'm here to represent Wright Rudder Aviation. Just take to put out all operations still weren't running great. The flight school itself is still constantly growing and climbing, along with the MESA program. Cadets consistently coming in with the MESA program and flight building time.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Anybody else? Sir? I see you have a name tag. It's good to come to these meetings with a name tag.
Good afternoon. My name is Jeff Rogers. I'm VP and Young Eagles Coordinator for EAA Chapter 1674. Walked in the room and thinking, that looks like Gene, but it couldn't be, right? I haven't seen you since Las Moguedas. Right, when I bumped into you. Anyway, y'all know the last event we had, we flew 40 kids. Very successful. We reset it up for last Saturday, but unfortunately we got winded out. So I'm in the process right now of doing rescheduling a new event for a week from this Saturday. So I've definitely got to say I've got a whole new appreciation for event coordinators, because setting up an event is tough, but trying to do a re-event, because the same kids are not available, the same volunteers, the same pilots, as well as getting all the static displays and things together. But we're still on track to get it going back. So we'll have one in a week, and then we'll have another one in 2 months from there. So that's pretty much where we're at now.
Wonderful. And these are meetings, discussion, as well as
No, these
flying?
are just the Young Eagle flights.
Okay.
We invite out the public, youth 18, from 8 to 17. They get a free flight with a pilot that volunteers. If they have any further interest, they get a free ground course with Sporties online, which, gosh, I paid $280 or something for, I think. And then they get a free flight lesson. There's free EAA membership. And yeah, also to throw some props to EAA, we've changed the insurance requirements and stuff. And as soon as I went to EAA, within a day, they got back to me with a custom policy just for what we needed. So
Wonderful.
definitely appreciate them, and really appreciate Wright Rudder, because they've basically given us carte blanche to run what we want when we want. And I know Andy's not here today, but definitely props to him for that. So,
Wonderful.
any other questions about our program?
Thank you very much, Jeff. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Anybody else from the public? Sir?
My name is James Chen. I represent the Crystal Aero Group. We're the flight school in Crystal River Airport. Today, I'm happy to wearing another hat, which is Quest Avionics. We officially moved the facility from Ocala Airport to Crystal River Airport. We're in the process of getting the FAA review, the manual, the inspections, so on and so forth, which was a little bit delayed during the holiday, but we anticipate to be up running. Keep the finger crossed, within a month or so, we'll be up running. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Hi, my name is Barry Simons, and I'm the president of EA Chapter 1674 of Airness. And what I just wanted to kind of mention also is that we do have regular meetings every third Saturday of the month at 9 a.m., and we typically have different presenters coming in talking about various aviation topics. It's open to the public. Anybody can come. You don't have to be a pilot or even in aviation. If anybody you know is interested in aviation, highly recommend you come out and talk with us, because we've just recently we put out a scholarship for a youth to get a glider rating, and that's been going successful so far. So he's already started his ground school, and then once that's done, then he'll start his glider rating. So we're trying to do things to get in the community, and also we have goals in the future to start a youth program to start working with the high schools and get people interested in aviation and how it can help them in their future. Thank you.
That's wonderful. And I'm sorry, did you say 9 o'clock every third Saturday?
Yes, that's correct. It's also posted on our website, ea1674.org. So, and we keep that updated, and also our Facebook, if anybody else wants to check that out, where we post pictures of our events and anything that's going on.
Wonderful. Thank you, Barry.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, on to new business. As we said, we do have one new member and 2 reappointed members, and we need to give them the oath of office. Do we have a Bible? No, we don't do that, do we?
I don't think so. Okay, so if you guys could please stand. Raise your right hand for me and repeat after me. I state your full name.
I, Carl Flanagan,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support, protect, and defend
that I will support, protect, and defend
the Constitution and government of the United States
the Constitution and government of the United States
and of the state of Florida,
and of the state of Florida,
and that I am duly qualified to hold office
and that I'm duly qualified to hold office
under the Constitution of the state,
under the Constitution of the state,
and that I will faithfully perform and accept the duties
and I will faithfully perform and accept the duties
of a member of the Aviation Advisory Board,
of a member of the Aviation Advisory Board,
on which I'm about to enter.
about which I'm about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you.
You didn't say that. Thank you very much. And welcome, Gene. Thank you so much for coming to join us.
Thank you.
We I always like to see new faces, fresh ideas. And anybody at any point in time, our membership rolls over every 2 years. And anybody that the BOCC appoints us. And so anybody that is interested in serving on the board, when vacancies come open, the BOCC always posts that. So basically, every year we have somebody spot opening up, whether it's at large members or a member that represents one of the 5 districts of the county. So feel free. We'd love fresh ideas. There's not necessarily a requirement that you be a pilot, although it's highly encouraged. We have to have, what is it, at least a majority of us have to be pilots?
I believe so.
Yeah, so, anyway, thanks for coming. Thank you, Barry, for joining us, Jean, for joining us, sorry. Now I need to take nominations for chairman and vice chairman. These are the highly sought-after positions, believe me. And really, there's not a whole lot to it other than somebody's got to call the meeting to order. So I'll take nominations for chairman.
I move that we keep the current chairman.
I second.
There's a motion and a second not to have a vote for chairman, but to make me do this again. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes.
Anybody object? Come on, help me out here. All right, made by Charlie, seconded by Carl. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion carries.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. A hard-fought campaign. I just want to thank all my supporters. Enjoy the donuts. For vice chairman, I'll take a motion for appointment for nomination for vice chairman. And just so you know, the current vice chairman is not here today. He was called out of town, unfortunately. So it's kind of unfair to pick on him, but carry on. What's your pleasure?
I would nominate George.
Would you now?
Second.
Okay, we have a nomination on the floor of George McDonald, the current vice chairman. Any other nominations?
Move nominations be closed.
Very well.
I second.
Move and second that the nominations be closed. All in favor of closing the nomination, say aye.
Aye.
The nominations being closed, all in favor of re-electing George to be vice chairman, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Same thing, different day. Very well, thank you very much. Now we come to the fun part. Actually, let's do the other stuff first. Let's do the power lines and the GPS approaches and then do the financial study.
I'll start with the runway 9 GPS approaches. I just kept that on there just for you, Charlie.
Thank you.
It will not be forgotten. That will be, this problem will go away once we have our Aegis survey during the runway extension project.
How do you spell Aegis?
AGIS.
It's like it's, what does that stand for?
Oh, I knew you were going to ask me that.
Uh-huh.
And I do know it, but. John,
Daniel, any idea?
Information. Boom. Thank you.
Mic drop. Very nicely done. Thank you. Just so you folks know, there are obviously runway 9 and 27 at Crystal River. Each has a GPS approach. When the threshold for runway 9 was moved to accommodate the expansion of Highway 19, that approach, the approach to runway 9 was no longer valid. The new touchdown point had to be certified, and it's been on the FAA's back burner for quite some time now. So Crystal River has only one GPS approach right now, runway 27. And once construction begins at that end of the runway, the approach end of runway 27, that part of the runway will be closed, which means that the GPS approach to runway 27 will be out of commission for some time. And the board is very motivated to make sure that the GPS approach to runway 9 comes back up before the approach to runway 27 goes down. Did I get that right?
You did.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Moving on, power lines.
Power lines, I'm going to be talking with Duke right now to get an agreement. I know that sounds like a broken record, but there was a new person that went over overseeing their transmission lines. So now that I have that new contact, I'm hoping that this is going to move swifter. But yeah, as soon as I get the agreement, start pushing it forward.
We wish you both good luck. We're all counting on you. Okay, financial analysis and business plan study. Ms. Jenkins, would you mind throwing this up on the screen for us, please? Kat said you had this ability. Uh-oh, here she comes. So,
Is it this year?
infrastructure, construction, and engineering, otherwise known as ICE, in the form of Mr. Daniel Elsey, commissioned on behalf of the Board of County Commissioners a study to be done by Quadrex Aviation in the person of Dr. Dave Byers to come up with a strategic business plan for the two airports for aviation in general in Citrus County. Dr. Byers met with many of the stakeholders. Yeah. You okay with that? All right. Trying to take my remote away. The Board of County Commissioners asked for the study to be done, basically to come up with a comprehensive plan of what to do with the airports moving forward. Dr. Byers met with a number of stakeholders, FBOs, county people, us, and put together a list of findings and recommendations, which he presented to the AAB last month. And we're here today. We've taken this, his plan and boiled it down to the least number of words. The Aviation Advisory Board, will now look through his plan and decide whether or not we agree with it. Anything we disagree with, we'll make recommended changes to. Mr. Elsey is here as well to provide the expert a consultation on if we're messing anything up as far as, yeah, that's not a good idea. He'll say, yes, it really is a good idea because, and here's why. And then at that point, we'll have our recommendations for the county. Next month, we will vote to accept, presumably, those recommendations that we come up with today, and then we'll present those to the Board of County Commissioners in May. So, having said that, the purpose of Dr. Byers' study, the purpose of this study was basically to provide guidance to the county as to what to do with the airports. Looking at the business models, how they serve the tenants and the community and visitors, how they do this now, and what potentially they should be doing in the future. His desired outcome is to come up with a business plan, a set of documents, guiding documents that will govern the airports and that will determine how the airports are going to be operated, how they're going to be supported and operated, with the goal, in his mind, being the long-term financial self-sufficiency of each. There's some question as to whether or not airports of this size can in fact be self-sufficient, even in the long term. But we'll leave that discussion for, I'll keep my opinions to myself until last. Anybody on the AAB have discussion about this and would like to make comments, criticism, support, suggestions on any of these?
I think you did an excellent job in coming up with the purpose and the outcome. I think that overall summarizes our purpose and intent that we were discussing prior to.
Mm-hmm. My one hesitancy in accepting this is the concept that long-term financial self-sufficiency of these airports is achievable. We, some county staff members and I, including Mr. Regan, went down to the Brooksville Airport and took a tour. We were met there by the airport manager. Brooksville Airport is self-sufficient, financially self-sufficient. They are a so-called enterprise zone. They make their own money and they spend it as they see fit, and are an entity unto themselves. How do they do this? Admittedly, according to them, they have about 2,500 acres in total, much of which is rented out to big corporations, big hangars, big infrastructure, all sorts of companies, pharmaceutical companies, construction companies. They have a railroad track that comes onto the airport grounds and delivers product to some of these firms. And that, according to the manager, is the primary reason why that airport is itself an enterprise zone. They have a 7,000-foot runway, 7,000-plus foot runway. They have a control tower, and they have a ton of revenue coming in from these rental things. We have a business park going up in Inverness that we hope will bring in a substantial amount of revenue. The total acreage of the two airports put together is not even a fifth of what Brooksville has. And the runways, Crystal River will, within the next few years, be just over 5,000 feet. Inverness is 5,000 feet now. To me, these are apples and oranges. And whether these airports can pay for themselves in the long term without at least considering what economic benefit they bring to the county in terms of jobs, in terms of business, in terms of fuel sales, aircraft rentals, the whole 9 yards. They bring a lot of economic value to the company, to the county. But to say that they actually raise enough revenue to pay for themselves, I don't know. Mr. Elsey, what's your point of view on that?
Before he starts, do you want me to call Dr. Byers on the line?
Would that be useful to you?
I think so. Yeah,
Okay.
Dave, he's sick. He went to a conference a couple weeks ago, came down with something. Didn't want to get everybody else sick.
Was it at least a good band?
Hope so. It was a symposium in Salt Lake City for design and construction. So. But I'll wait for call.
Good afternoon, Mr. Dave Byers.
Hey, Dr. Byers, it's Todd Regan. You're on the air. How are you?
Oh, good. How about yourself?
I'm doing all right. We've already started, and we just want to loop you in, so chime in when you need to.
Okay, well, I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person, but trust me, you don't want what I
Todd, I don't think he's projecting.
No, he's not going.
You guys can hear?
Nope.
No.
Dr. Byers, can you talk again, please?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah. Is that everyone here?
Everybody hear me okay?
Okay. All right, we got you.
Dr. Byers, it's Heiko Kallenbach. I'm sorry that we didn't dial you in earlier, but I was making a comment that the goal of each airport being self-sufficient seems to be quite a stretch. And this is based on what we see right now, what we see down the road, and in particular what we saw when we toured the Brooksville Airport. They are completely self-sufficient, but they are an entity unto themselves. They've got thousands of acres, 2,500 acres of land in total, much of which is rented out to large corporations. And the airport manager himself says that it is because of that arrangement largely that they are able to be self-sufficient. Without that, he doubts that would be the case. We have, of course, a fifth of that amount of land. We have the business park coming up in Inverness, and we have a runway extension coming up in Crystal River. Outside of that, how do you see it being feasible in the long term to make these airports self-sufficient?
Okay, well, first off, that whole concept of being financially self-sufficient is really a long-term prospect. Essentially, that's the goal. And it should be for any airport operating in an environment like yours. How you would accomplish that, is usually a combination of things that are aeronautical, aeronautical use as opposed to non-aeronautical use. which was the experience that we discovered when we were doing research several years ago on, what airports, could we identify. So it's essentially a lot of different components of what what you do in terms of generating revenue, but it's also the cost side of the equation too that you measure as well. And when I say financially self-sufficient, there's actually two measures, two levels. One would be just taking care of your operational expenses with the revenues that you do collect, and then there's a capital contribution that the county traditionally makes to cover the sponsored costs of a federal or a state project. Those costs I wouldn't be as concerned about, primarily because you're getting an improvement to the asset, which the county owns at a highly leveraged cost. So if you could just cover your operational expenses with the revenues, that I think constitutes, the term financial self-sufficiency, that you can do that over the long term. Obviously, you're not going to do it today. It may take you several years to get to that point, but that should be a goal that at least the county is not subsidizing the operation of the airport.
Okay. So would it be accurate to say in your last bullet point here that we're talking about helping achieve the long-term operational financial self-sufficiency?
That would be correct, yes. I mean, if you could cover your capital costs, that's better yet. But, in terms of, goals that you could achieve, that would be, I would say, one of your primary targets.
Yeah, and to add to what Dave's saying, the purpose and outcome was provided to us from the county and the original scope document from Frank. And there's a lot to break down in there, and to dovetail into what Dave's saying, self-sufficiency, sustainability, it's one of the keystones of the FAA, and the goal for every airport is to try to meet self-sustainability, whether that's ad valorem taxes, property taxes that help operations and maintenance, if it's an enterprise fund, or if you're like a Brooksville that you have compensation enough to cover increased capital costs and operational expenses. So long term, what we identified and looking at the purpose, trying to fill in the blanks for the outcome is what would be the things that you would need to do to become financially self-sufficient. Not necessarily that is the goal. Right? So long term, and we'll talk through that, we talked about maybe 2 or 3 functions that need to be looked at, one more priority than the latter. And so I think the financial side of it, that would come later. Whereas the operational rules, regulations, staffing, to be able to accommodate similar business like you have that they have at Brooksville.
Okay, everybody good with that? Moving on then. The plan summary, everybody can read it for themselves here. I assume the AAB has read it. Anybody have a comment that they'd like to make?
I just think we need more people in the financial to identify what the cost and the revenue is with the airport. Right now, when we look at it, it's kind of mixture and intermixed. I'd like to see something more definitive.
Okay. And I think that's where the operations and administrative staff
Yes.
will certainly come in. Anybody from the public on any of these bullet points? Yes, James.
As you know that we're on the front line running the FBO. I had a concern on the item number 3, the FBO lease underperforming financially. I'm glad Doctor had mentioned it the financial sustainability, it's a popular word that everybody agrees that in concept, but the equation is how much is the operating cost to keep the door open with the background we are operating, and we are at the front line. We know how hard that is, and we know how hard it was previously. So I want to be careful with that statement. What is the implication to the future? Now, the second item I had a comment is both airport is part of our land-use infrastructure as such infrastructure item, such as a park, such as a jail, such as a hospital, such as any education law facility. It's necessary for this society, but I don't know how you're going to balance that with the financial sustainability alone. I don't know any jail make money. I don't know any hospital make money, but it's necessary. And I think that component I want to be doctor to have a consideration, and I'm sure the board is aware of that. There's a balance of that. I hear what he said about the financial sustainability. I certainly want to be able to financially sustainable. Otherwise, I'm continue to lose the money up to a point that I have to close the door. But it need to be carefully considered.
Yeah, to comment on that, really comes down to the mentality of the county and what you want to adopt. And what James was saying is it a public use, like a park, like a bus? You know, yeah, you pay $1 or something to ride a bus, but is that bus system making money? And so when you look at how airports operate, are they a public good or do they operate as a business? And it doesn't have to be one extreme or the other. It could be a combination of things. And so when looking at leases, our goal objectively was to identify what the value is based on data that we have and comparative to other markets. Because really, when you look at the vacancy rates and waiting list for your hangars, there is a demand. So when you look at supply and demand, really what tips those scales is cost, right? So somebody may be willing to leave one place to go to another based on a lower cost, but if there's no vacancies anywhere else and you have vacancies, you know, demand would say they're going to pay whatever the market goes or higher. Mm-hmm. And so our goal, again, objectively, was to say, this is what your current lease value is. The implied lease value is X. This is the difference. And so in both airports, both FBOs, it was identified that what's your value that you have based on an appraisal that's outdated at this point. But even with that appraisal information, CPI increases, you're still falling short of what the total value, just normal market value, not in comparison to we're going to take advantage of depleted supply somewhere else. Purely in this market, you're underperforming.
Okay.
Could you expand a little bit on the first part of that summary item, bullet 3? Why do you think they're underperforming financially?
Right. So in the presentation that we gave prior, when you look at what you're currently charging for T hangars, which you're charging for hangar leases, the revenue coming in to what the FBOs are paying each month. When you look at that, you know, over a year, it's quite stark, and it's different for each airport. They're not exactly the same. The disparity of what the implicit value of Inverness to what Wright Rudder's paying is a little closer, and then on the other side for Crystal River, it's even further. Again, objective look at what the data is, not necessarily a recommendation born out of that.
But isn't that, again, getting the cost benefit and being able to record what your revenue and your costs are so that you can identify where those issues are?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Dr. Byers, do you have anything to add?
Well, you know, talking about the assertion that the the FBO leases are underperforming. In certain cases, what the appraised value was for the for the use of the property, and the fact that whether or not there was an escalation clause. Obviously the appraisals are several years old, and if you were to do one today, I'm certain that that number might increase. So a lot of it has to do with what is fair market value for a facility located at either airport. You do have comparisons with other airports, but it's not always apples to apples, but you can essentially identify a range that they should fall within, and that's what the past appraisal attempted to do. Just looking forward, and the idea that, again, this isn't going to happen overnight, but with the anticipation that in the next round of lease negotiations that you can get closer to what should be identified as fair market value, should be the goal, or should be the target that you're working towards. And again, it's a partnership that there may be some things that they might provide the other party. So that's all part of that process.
Okay. Anybody else have a comment about that third bullet that Mr. Chen brought up? I guess my concern is, and bear in mind that next month we're going to be voting on this, and we're going to say, yes, Board of County Commissioners, do this. My concern is rates need to be increased. It might be, give the Board of County Commissioners more leeway if we were to say, and leases are underperforming financially and need to be reviewed. And rates need to be reviewed somewhere, because at the end of the day, one can talk about fair market value all one wants, but if an FBO or a flight school or whatever is in and of itself underperforming because of market pressures, you can only get so much blood from a stone. To the extent that they're already in the red, they simply won't be able to increase to pay more than they're already paying. So then if we simply say, by golly, the rates are going up no matter what, then do we wind up with no FBO at all? And I don't think that's what anybody wants. So my proposal at this point would be to, at the very least, strike the word increased and turn it into reviewed. Rates need to be reviewed, something to that effect. That would make me a lot more comfortable. That would make me as a commissioner a lot more comfortable to hear as a recommendation. We need to review this. We need to talk about this. We need to understand what it is that the FBOs need to be stronger, to have stronger business models, and we need to see what we can do to recoup a little bit of the money that the taxpayers are putting into these airports. Does that make sense?
It does, and I think that, we've had conversations about this in the past, and as already that's been noted, is the consistency in the financial reporting of actual expenses attributed to each of the FBOs. We may or may not have the accurate information that's necessary in order to come up with a statement such as this, which obviously is, apparently very conclusive in that rates need to be increased. I think that there needs to be a deep dive into, and it needs to be a concerted effort for both FBOs and the county to come to an agreement on that format, that platform that's going to be utilized that will track these accurately in order to be able to determine their real feasibility. And it's going to take some work on the part of all three, and I think there's going to be some heavy lifting on the part of the county in order to be able to identify, categorize, to be able to support that in guiding. I believe what Mark has already asked for is, additional individuals for each of the FBOs to monitor that with their fingers on the pulse of what needs to be done, when does it need to be done, and as has been brought up in the past, are we looking at timelines of taking care of the necessary maintenance on a timely schedule so that we don't get hit with having to pay some high dollar expenses that we weren't counting on, no different than the county does anyway in their financial analysis and projecting what is going to be needed for the future.
Anybody else?
Right. And if I can interject too, and I was looking back at my original presentation. I think the operative word was renegotiate. Whether the rates go up, down, or whichever. The idea that you're charging for the use of the facility to a private operator, his profitability probably isn't as much of I don't want to say concern, but that's his business. Whether he can make money at the rates that he's being charged for the use of the facilities. I think with Wright Rudder's lease doesn't have any connection to his profitability one way or the other, as opposed to Crystal Rivers, which has a flat rate plus a percentage of gross revenues, which does make you a party to the profitability of the FBO. The recommendation is to get out from under that and just charge what's fair in a negotiated agreement, and let them go about their business, and they are the masters of their own destiny in terms of their own profitability, whether or not they can make enough money to make sense based on the rates that they're paying for the use of the property. I think in both cases, the idea that they're also making revenue off of the hangar rentals outside of their core business without any compensation going back to the county, I think is a target for renegotiation, because you are still incurring the expenses of maintaining those facilities, but you're not receiving any return for that. So again, that would be the basis for the renegotiation, is putting everything on the table and then reaching, that conclusion that, the FBOs can continue to operate in a profitable fashion, and yet the county is receiving at least some compensation back for the expenses.
We were working off numbers from an appraisal that was outdated. If Dr. Byers could share what year that appraisal was done in and how far we are behind if we're using this data.
Did you hear that, Dr. Byers? What year was that appraisal done?
Oh, the appraisal? I believe that was, just a second. I believe that was 2016. Yeah. Yeah, it was done in 2016. So yeah, it's got some age to it. And again, a large basis for the appraisal, process is to look at comparables, but they also consider the local conditions. Here's the activity at this particular airport. So it's essentially that determination of what the market would bear in a particular situation based on their judgment. So, you obviously can't compare yourself with Brooksville or any other airport side by side, but you can get at least a notion of what is fair for each airport.
So did I hear you correctly that you didn't in fact say rates need to be increased? They just need to be, we need to go back over them and see what the right number is, and that could be higher, it could be lower?
It could be, you know, and again, like I said, that's the renegotiation process.
Right.
That maybe you are getting more revenue from the hangar rentals outside of their primary facility, and again, the appraisal may say, you know, because of inflation and because of other conditions in the general environment, that maybe the rates do go up per square foot, or you know, who's to say? But yeah, it's, you know, I didn't mean to imply that they would increase. It's just that they do need to be renegotiated.
Okay. So maybe reviewed is a better word.
Yeah. Yes.
Agreed.
Yes, sir.
Todd, question for you is, based on what Dr. Byers has indicated and what we've been hearing and reading and listening to James, are all leases at the same rate across the board?
There's
Or are there
some-
varying degrees of
Ye-
prices per square?
There is varying degrees, I would say more or less kind of slight, just because of when that person signed the agreement. Most of those agreements are 4 years. So it's more of you're getting more of an average than you are, the information you're getting is more of an average.
Okay, so in going back to what James has indicated, then tracking the income received, there may be a shortfall simply because of the timing of the leases. And are the leases being, whenever they're coming up for negotiation again, are they being brought up to current market rates, or do you know that?
I'd have to look into that to see if what that is, but
That's what the CPI increase is supposed to do for you, is sort of maintain that value.
yeah.
That you sign the original lease, and then there would be a CPI increase every year to keep pace with inflation, so that at the end of the term, it's not sticker shock, that if you go back and have it reappraised, that you're not that far off. You know, and at least in
Carl, are you asking hangar leases or FBO leases?
No, I'm talking about hangar leases because the FBOs are the ones that are relying upon the hangar leases to support, yes or no?
Which hangars are we talking about?
They are, okay. So let me ask James to come back up.
No,
I want to hear a comment from him.
well, I do want to say something before
Okay.
that is, this year, there is no CPI increase, and it's because of the last 3 years, there was a 20% CPI increase. So if that helps answer your question about the hangar rentals.
Well, all the leases, this is my take on it, are not dated the same, so they're rolling leases. So whenever they're
Yes.
coming up for their renewal, if you will, given that, are they being brought up to the CPI index as Dr. Byers has indicated?
Well, the CPI index that's affected every year. Every person's going to have some type of effect, but whatever they signed on for that specific hangar, the square footage, those prices are going to be a little bit different, but they all have that CPI effect.
Well, that's what I wanted to make sure of, is
Yeah.
they're all on a rolling schedule. They're all being revised and brought to date in order to be able to assist the FBOs in their operations.
Yeah, there's two questions in
Yeah,
there.
they are.
Yeah, the first part is yes, but the second part, it depends on the FBO or the airport, because Inverness has one row of T hangars that the county manages, and then in Crystal River, we have 2 T hangars and then a box hangar. that we
May I
manage as well.
interject one thing? We got into discussions before as to what CPI we're gonna use. Can we turn around and, in this, declare exactly what we're gonna use, or put it in the contracts at this CPI based on this MSA or so? So at least everybody knows what's going. We're not doing the Tampa, and then at Ocala is something different, and the MSA for which Citrus County is different. Identify what it is so that it's, everybody understands exactly what's gonna be, the CPI they're gonna use.
Correct. We did discuss that. I don't know if you were here, Mark, but I can get that information out to you for sure, no problem.
I would add,
Actually, I was just going to say that my recommendation was get away from the CPI and just have a set percentage increase for, and get away from the variations of the CPI going up, down, or whichever direction. So
2-3%.
at least the tenant knows what his increase is going to be year to year. So it could be a 2%, 3% increase annually, and that's set in the agreement, so that there is no no variation.
And what that'll do is that'll prepare the tenants to, they should know how much they're gonna have to pay every year versus getting a letter in the mail, and have 30 days to respond, so.
James?
I had the privilege to carry on what Captain Tom Davis had established this company. I had the best flight instructor, Goody, and had best mentor to operating the FBO. And I got a chance to work side by side with Tom and get a lot of background information for the struggle he had been through. The current lease Crystal River Airport FBO had with the county, I inherited when I bought the company. So it was a continuation of what was being set up before. We did not deliberately arrange that on the purpose. But I do know for many, many years, Tom had operated that facility with all the passion he had, with all the labor and sweat he put it in. He's continually losing money. To a point, he was almost to give it up. And that's when the arrangement was coming to have a baseline of the lease and give him a little break on the baseline so he can survive. That was the intention. It was not a break county give to Tom so he could be rich. That's not the purpose. So he can be survive. And after that, any annual gross sale operating go over that baseline, the county take 5%. So when I reviewed that lease, I said, this doesn't make sense. I agree with the doctor. We want to get rid of that, whatever percentage as well. Because if I anticipate that I will be super rich, I'll make a lot of sale, and the county take 5% off that, that's a lot of the increase of the leases to the county. Right? But then I look at when the business was bad, when we had a hard time, that's when this lifeline to save the FBO. Now, I bought the company, it was running great for a couple of years, boom, we had a pandemic. We lost 90% of our students, international students. And that clause saved this FBO. Now, even with the pandemic, every year we are still above that baseline. We pay additional 5%, which bring about equal to any other, the other FBO was paying for. So we're not paying less. That baseline gave us a chance to survive. Now, I can tell you for the first hand, it's hard to run FBO. With all the increase of the parts, with all the increase of the overhead, and 5 years ago, the salary, the rate, the parts, the insurance, everything had increased. I agree with Dr. said, you want to make a financial sustainable. I want to, but be careful with what that is going to impose to FBO. That's all.
Thank you. Sir?
My name is Bud Schaffer. I have a hangar I own a hangar at Inverness Airport. And this kind of is the first I've heard about this study. But if you're trying to make these two small airports self-sufficient and put all the weight on the FBOs, that's a pretty big challenge. One thing I don't see on here is what revenues do these airports bring into the community? And I think that would be substantial. So if you want a fair assessment, somebody needs to do a study on what revenues are coming in to offset the cost of operating these airports. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Byers, is there a way that can be measured in some manner?
Well, certainly, the state actually does a pretty good job of establishing the economic benefit of traffic that comes and goes, plus the employment, that's generated by the airport and some of the offshoots of that. But again, rather than just focusing on the FBOs, the other side of that self-sufficiency equation is the non-aeronautical development. So one of the recommendations was to look at all your property at both airports outside the business park and see if there are other opportunities to turn that into revenue, leasing that property to a business that doesn't have any connection with aviation whatsoever, which actually helps you out because you're not as subject to the just the variations in how aviation goes. Right now, there's a pilot shortage, so flight training is a big component of a lot of airports, including yours. But that could dissipate, or we could have another pandemic or something else that shuts down the aviation world or severely hampers it. But if you have some other type of development out there, whether it's maybe a fast food joint or just something that somebody could take advantage of using that property, and you get the lease revenue from that, you're not as subject to you can charge what the market will bear directly. Has a tendency to kind of soften that cycle that that aviation is consistently providing everybody. So that was the recommendation as well, is and make that a focus, because again, going back to that study that I did several years ago with my colleagues in identifying financially self-sufficient airports, it was that non-aeronautical development that set them apart. And like I said, it could take some strategizing in terms of your next master plan or ALP update to just take a look at how the property is intended to be used, and I'm talking about the vacant property that's still out there, and looking for those opportunities to turn that into revenue.
Daniel?
Yeah, so to really boil it down, I mean, when we talk about the rates being increased, I think there's a lot more that goes into that. Again, policies, procedures, the way the leases are written currently, what your share of revenue is retained back to the county compared to what the appraisal recommendation was. And for clarification there, that rate was less than the other comparable airports around you, acknowledging that you can't be apples to apples to Brooksville. And so looking at it as it is today, that's the intent of it, is the returning revenues back to the county is not what it should be. So for Inverness, the hangars that fall under the lease, comparative to what your current lease rate that you're getting, it leaves a lot on the table. And one of the sentences that was in our, at least in our task, look at maximizing return on investment to the county, but also creating market comparable terms that are equitable for both the county and the FBOs. So you don't want to raise the rates to such a point where these guys are gone and now you're dealing with, a national company, even if they're willing to take that on. That's not the intent of it. And so when you look at raising the rates, if you take it as it is today, they should be raised, comparable to all the data that's available. Now, if you were to rewrite or renegotiate the leases to take out the 5% return on revenue, if you were to take out the fuel flowage fee at Inverness, if you were to take out some of those hangers and the responsibilities of what falls on the FBO, what falls on the county, again, that all goes back to the mindset that the county wants to adopt, and either delegating out some of the responsibility or there and bringing it back in-house. But intrinsically, you need more staff.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
My name is Kristen Neeson. I am a local realtor and property owner in Crystal Paradise Estates, which is the community that's behind the Crystal River Airport. I'm new to this. I just joined Diane, so I'm seeing your guys' presentations and everything. I'm wondering or asking why it's not more concentrated on making the airports more financially performing versus expanding. Like, why aren't they more sustainable financially and then expand? If that makes sense, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and that's a really good question. Unfortunately, it's one of those chicken or the egg sort of things.
Okay.
If you have a longer runway, then larger airplanes will be able to land and take off from there, which means that more corporations will fly their employees in, more folks that charter larger commuter jets, corporate jets,
Right.
will be able to come here and vacation.
Right.
And so on, and all of that brings more business. So you can't bring that business in until you've expanded the runway.
Okay.
Arguably, they do, when I say they, whoever they are already doing everything that they can think of to bring in business. I know that both flight schools advertise throughout. Crystal Aero Group gets a lot of international students coming in
Right.
to train there. They have a great reputation of that. Wright Rudder has the ongoing contract with Mesa Airlines. They bring in a lot of cadets there that fly in and out. So they're doing everything that they can, I think, at least the things that they can think of
Right.
to improve revenue. And it's sort of one of those things that go hand in hand, I think.
Gotcha. And then just to put out there, the expansion of the Crystal River Airport and having those larger planes come in is going to directly affect my community. So it's just something that's very concerning to us to have those larger jets coming in like that, so.
Sure. And when we say larger jets, we're talking marginally bigger. We're not talking airlines or
Yeah,
anything like that.
yeah, that's
So, in other
definitely
words,
understandable.
a 15-passenger jet
Right,
rather
right.
than a 9-passenger jet.
Yeah.
They, for the most part, they sound the same. They've got the same level of noise. Maybe there will be more of them.
Yeah, and we're just concerned about them being closer since the runway will now be closer to our community. Because they're going to be coming in lower to get to the runway sooner.
Right.
So we're
right.
just worried what that's going to do to our community.
And the FAA has very strict standards as to just where how close they are allowed to come.
Right.
So when they are landing to the west coming in there will be certain minimums that they can't go below. And maybe they even are kept up high a little bit and then have to dip down to get to the runway in order not to unduly affect the folks that are below.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you.
Any more comments on this? I think we've beaten the FBO leases to a pulp.
I just sitting here listening to the dialogue, and I think we need to be careful about what hangars are in the FBO leases and what hangars are the responsibility of the county.
All of which we're coming to in follow-on slides.
Okay.
We ready to move on?
Yes.
As I read this, it's go out and find more money. Can anybody truly disagree with this recommendation? In other words, we need infrastructure, we need staff that writes grants, we need folks that are going to go out and look for available grants, available money, identify places that are ready to hand out money for airport development, and go out and ask for that money. Anybody have an issue with that one? Anybody
No,
from the?
but one statement is that, again, the financial for a grant request what you're going to do for, it, what your program's gonna be and what's the estimates. And we don't have a lot of that, because we don't have good financial, statements right now.
Fair point, fair point. All of which needs to come.
Yep.
Okay. And this is where some of that comes. Airport staff. Dr. Byers recommends that, he's got 2 recommendations for this, all of which boil down in essence to having dedicated people that work for the county, such as Mr. Regan, that are focused on the airports themselves. In an ideal world, he would have a county employee at each of the 2 airports, pretty much full-time. He would have a grant writer, pretty much full-time, constantly looking at things that the county would like to do at the airports and looking for money to do those. And basically, as such, he's got a short-term and a long-term recommendation. Initially, he recommends that we have at least 2 full-time county staff people focused on the airports. One of them that the operations manager, monitors the day-by-day and does everything that needs to be done with respect to actually running and administering the airport, and then a financial assistant, somebody that writes the grants presumably, or at least gets with the county to write the grants. And so, Todd, we have this already in the form of you. This would be adding basically one more person to the staff, is that right?
An operations specialist,
Well, the financial administrator.
adding that person, yeah, it would take, instead of essentially having to ask 3 or 4 or 5 people, that they have to take a part of it's kind of like a collateral.
Yeah.
For instance, Danae helps me out, with some of my duties. It would be just one person that would cover all of those.
That
instead of going
would
to 5
cover
different-
what the various different people do on a part-time basis.
Yes.
Anybody have comments on that?
Yeah, I would ask Dr. Byers or what value added does that person or persons have versus the cost of employing those people?
I could add to that.
Okay.
So when it says operations manager, maybe the way airport operations works, you start off with an operations specialist, somebody that's either recently out of school or has a couple years on airfield experience. It could be a pilot, it could be a ramp agent, somebody that's been around airplanes and understands it. And so the value that you get from having those people there is it's a county airport. You own it, it's your asset, so you need to protect it. And so if there's an issue with a tenant or an itinerant pilot, if there's a runway issue, I heard that lighting was out at Crystal River on the taxiway. Those items don't linger, they're taken care of. So you have on-site representation. Our recommendation is to hire one, and whether that person operate at one airport one day, the next airport the other day, and they're only 30 minutes apart, go back and forth. But being more responsive, and so that your risk exposure is lowered, and you become a good steward to the flying community, because if Todd, as we're talking about the financial assistant, with the amount of money that you're showing on your capital improvement plan and the amount of projects that you have comparative to other airports, you're blowing them out of the water. That takes a lot of time. It's a lot of administrative time that you're in the office. So if he leaves his desk and goes out to the airport, you're talking to the FBOs, you're talking to pilots. You guys operate at airports, it's a different environment. And so trying to get back to the office to handle these grants and the financial aspect of it, it's difficult. Every airport that's made this step, and when you look at Ocala, Brooksville, 10 years ago or plus, they were going through the same, initiative. And so they've added operation staff. And having somebody there, not recommending 24 hours a day, as your operations change, then you could look at that. But having somebody available and a face, not just a phone number, to be a representative of the county is beneficial at every airport I've ever dealt with. Hope that answered your question.
But the key that you just indicated is you've got to have a dedicated. It can't be a multitasker with other functions or responsibilities, they've got to be solely focused on airport business.
Well, the alternative is you have a large county staff. You've got maintenance, you've got public works, you've got administrative, you've got grants. If there is another person that the county is willing to designate to be a representative and to be out there, that would work just as well. So in lieu of that, our recommendation is to bring on a full-time employee to be out there. And I know that in making that determination, I know that the county has open positions for maintenance, public works positions that they can't really fill, and you might have the same issue with this, but likelihood you're going to attract somebody that's not from here, that either works at Tampa, Orlando, some other general aviation airport in the state, or perhaps some other state altogether. It's kind of like the military for operations. You move around a lot, and you know that.
I know that very well.
And so it's a custom. They come in, your retention rate's a little low. You might keep, if it's an operations specialist, it's lower paid. They may stay 2-3 years. If it's an operations manager, you probably have a little bit of longevity, but a higher price.
So question, was it yours or Dr. Byers to bring in a recent graduate that has that skill set, or an existing individual that's somewhere in place?
In my experience, hiring operations specialist, theoretical knowledge is great, but practical knowledge is what you need. So when you're out there dealing with tenants, especially if you're going through a motion to change or update rules, well, that's not how we've done it. The guy that just came out of college might not have the tactful, ability to handle that situation, whereas somebody that's been there at an airport for a couple years kind of experienced it firsthand.
So bottom line, do you see that the current person that's doing this work filling in for the airport operations manager, and the idea is that he becomes that person and the county hires a financial administrative assistant? Is that the idea?
No, this would be, so in essence, Todd is the director of the airport. I know his title is different, airport project manager, engineering project manager, but Todd would facilitate the long-term, oversight of the airport. It'd still have oversight of day-to-day, but understanding when to, how to navigate to get the grants, compliance with FAA standards, how all the pieces fit together, whereas the operations specialist or manager would be at the airports handling inspection duties, compliance, tenant relations. Not to say that Todd would be removed from that. Hopefully, if his time allows, by bringing on some of these staff members, that he could have face at the airports and still get his day-to-day job done. And then the financial administrative assistant would be to take some of that burden of some of the minutia of filling out applications, all the things that go into the FAA rules. They're pretty extensive. And so as you've got multiple projects underway, 15-something projects, $35 million of capital improvements in total over the next 5 years, that's a lot for one person to handle. Not to say it can't be done, because it's being done, but as you grow, especially as you start to fill up the business park, you bring on new hangars, you extend the runway, operations will increase and be more complex.
So the initial recommendation really is for 3 people?
No, I'm sorry. So you have Todd, and then it'd be to add an operations specialist. Well, I guess 3 people total, yes.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so you're
3
so you
people,
have one, you're
two
adding-
more than what we have today?
Yep.
Got it. Okay. Alonda?
I was just gonna echo basically what Daniel was saying on that. Was we're at a really pivotal time where before one position that was at the airport wasn't handling $35 million worth of projects just at Inverness. That's not including what else going on in Crystal River. And so the operations and the things that we're getting feedback from that a lot of people aren't happy about, hangar maintenance, the day-to-day things that are falling through the cracks, it's really hard for one person to be able to manage all of those issues that we had before on top of having that $35 million budget that he's having to move forward every single day with these projects. And we're also on a timeline basis on both the commission wanting the projects being spent. I mean, you guys are hearing that at every meeting that they're wanting to move the projects forward. We're getting more money from Tallahassee every time we go, which is great for both airports. But in order to go back and ask for that money, every time we go, we get asked, well, have you spent it? What are you doing with it? You know, so in order for us to keep that pipeline open for improvements, then we have to make sure we're spending that at a, you know, pace that they're happy with. And so by adding those positions, I think that's where your value comes in at, is that you're going to see those projects happen, but you're also going to not lose your traction on all the other maintenance issues that's been brought up, so.
Thank you.
I'd just like to point out that the first bullet up there, the airport operations manager, the sub-bullets are primarily provided today by the FBOs and Todd. So the FBOs have a lot to do with day-to-day operations, ensuring compliance with FAA regulations, promoting safety, and the FBOs are not paid for that per se. It's something they expect. And if somebody comes along and lands with a landing gear up, it's the FBO's responsibility to clean up the runway and get the airplane off the runway so we can reopen the airport, not the county. So it's I think pretty important to understand that exactly. An old boss of mine told me one time, if two people are responsible, nobody is. And so it's kind of important, I think, to understand how it is today versus how you guys envision it.
Yeah. Clarify, a couple of those items and responsibilities are explicitly written in leases as far as, you know, airfield inspections, some of the, you know, rudimentary inspection items. At the end of the day, it's a county asset. And even though that responsibility is somewhat delegated in a contractual way, that risk exposure is still borne on the county. So if an airplane crashes and NTSB FAA comes out and says, well, you had a light out, and you say, well, that was the FBO's responsibility, you're still going to get sued. Mm-hmm. The county will. And so what that does is it protects you as your operations continue and it gets busier. Our recommendation is to take that responsibility out of the lease because it should be with the county. Issuing NOTAMs to airmen, that should be Todd and his staff's responsibility. It's just how it goes. Inspections of the fuel farm, you know, inspections of the runway, because if you're delegating those responsibilities out to the FBO, is the FBO there with FDOT when they come do the annual inspection? They might be, but ultimately, you guys are the sponsor. The county's the sponsor, the county gets the grants, the county is responsible for upholding, you know, the advisory circulars. And that's our take on it. And again, it goes back to the basis of mentality of how much do you want to delegate out of what was done in the past and how much do you want to retain within. But it really, at that part, is risk exposure. And inherently, aviation is a higher risk when you look at actuaries, and just our recommendation to have somebody on site. One last clarification, you have two up there. If it were me and I could only get one, I would go with the operations person. If you don't cannibalize the other because you think you have to approve both of them, having somebody out there so that Todd doesn't have to drop what he's doing and go, you know, look at a roof leak or a light out. You have somebody out there that could then report back, and it's a lot easier and quicker for him to process that than getting in the truck, driving out there, and doing all that. Whereas the financial, I think that is important with the amount of documents that are transferred for all the grants. But again, if there's a way to leverage internal county staff, which you're already doing, but it does take time, as we see.
Thank you. James?
I'm curious to know what's the recommending salary for that position, because I want to send my resume.
So right now, it's about
Even Dr. Byers.
Most positions requiring 2 years, about 40,000, 50,000.
50,000.
Now, operations manager, that title in of itself, it's different. So whether you need a manager or whether you need a specialist is about 40, 50. Manager could be 50 and up. depending on what type of experience they have, whether they have a CM accreditation, a master's, a college degree, all the things that you might put in your job description.
Okay.
50 grand,
Anybody else before we move on to the long term? So the long term, as we understand it, adds a third person, which is really a fourth person?
Yeah, so you would, if you were to start off with a blank slate, and Todd wasn't here, I would say you would need an executive director, because all the things that are being asked in this environment is not typical for an airport this size, which is great. You talk about legislative funding, grant funding, the partnership with your agencies. It's a lot to juggle, and it almost becomes a quasi-political position. You have to be able to navigate when you're dealing with boards and the advisory board, the BOCC, the public. It's not just the nuts and bolts of, runway pavement. And so that's where being able to strategically plan and make yourself competitive in the economic market, so you're economic development, but you're also an operations guy. So there's a lot that goes into it. So in the long term, as your business park comes online, if it's sooner than 5 years, you need somebody that, and I'm just gonna be transparent, that Todd came in, filled a position that was occupied for a long time, and he applied. They gave him the job. If you look at his background, 20-plus years in the military, it's kind of the type of person you want. I worked under a guy for 10 years that was he was a colonel in the Air Force, full retired, and then he worked 20-something years at the airport. The guy that replaced him, really different atmosphere. So I really appreciated how that was operated. But in terms of airport experience, not so much. I mean, you operate it in your airport, but as far as running it, it's a little bit different. I think through the past year, trial by fire, drinking from a fire hose, learning all the things that you have going on, he's on-the-job training, he's gotten the experience. So trying to attract someone to be an executive director is a heavy undertaking, because then you're talking quite a bit more, probably double, not triple, than an operations specialist. So long-term vision, Todd could be that person. Need to evaluate when that time comes. And he and I have talked about getting a CM, getting an accreditation, becoming, more involved in networking. There's a conference coming up in Alabama that all the airport people come together, share ideas, and past administration may have not really been advocates for that, as the responsibility was kind of delegated away from the county. But, I started off as an operations specialist at an airport. Here I am. So, so that's our recommendation. Get an executive director in there that can navigate the politics of it. And then operations and maintenance, this is more in line with financial self-sustainability and being an enterprise fund. If you're not going to share resources because you're not under the umbrella of the county, you would need to duplicate and silo those resources within the airport structure. So operations, again, you might have an operations specialist at each airport and an operations manager that oversees that group. That person really can only work 8 hours, 5 days a week, so you have a gap, right? If that person's sick, so as operations change, you may need coverage for the weekend. You may need coverage 24 hours a day. And as your operations get more and more complicated, and really it's impacting the community, how, noise exposure, runway inspections, having somebody oversee that. And then again, in finance and administration, if you're an enterprise fund, you've got to develop your yearly budget. You've got to keep up with accounts payables, receivables, asset purchases, depreciation, selling off assets that are no longer, all the things that go into running, it would become a silo. And that's more long-term. So I think in the short term, 5 years or more, I think you'll be all right with an operations specialist and somebody to help Todd out with the accounting grant processing.
So is Todd one of these three people?
Currently, his title doesn't represent it, but I would say he's the executive director.
He's probably all three of them.
He is, yeah, he wears a lot of hats.
Okay. Any questions?
I need more heads.
Questions on this? Comments on this?
It's yeah. Question is on the financial, because that's my specialty. Is the, two things. Did you check to see how the county is accounting for? Because there was a lot of questions on where the revenue was coming from, which airport was doing what, and the same thing with the expenses. And what I'm really looking at is where's the maintenance budget? And I didn't see any maintenance budgets in any of the budgets that I really looked at when I tried to go through the county budgets.
Yeah, right now, the airports are not operated as a cost center, so the cost attributed directly to operating the airports is not known. And so Dave put together a pro forma statement. We have some cost identified, but if you're, in a nutshell, in a silo, if you were to operate, how much do you pay for stamps? How much do you pay for paper? How much do you pay for fuel for the, all the operating expenses?
Yeah.
It's not there.
But I'm more interested in just a little more of a general overview, because there's not even enough to say, okay, this is exactly the revenue that we're bringing in for the airports, so much for Crystal, so much for, and what the additional economic industrial park's gonna bring.
So we were able to identify that with the amount you're getting from all your leases for revenue. Crystal River is 54,000 and some change, plus the 5%. Inverness is more in the 70,000 range. And then all the additional T-hangers, box hangers, I think we did a decent job at identifying the revenues. And then as far as the business park, based on, there was a market analysis done, I think it was GAI that did it. And roughly, if you were to fill up all the parcels, not have any out parcels, it'd be just shy of $13 million a year for just the industrial park. And so outside of that, what your potential revenue would be based on available acreage, and we could do that. And that kind of leads into the question the lady asked of, why are you expanding? Well, it'd be like if you only had 2 customers and you had all your fixed and variable costs and you're trying to pass on those costs to only 2 customers. It's a lot easier if you have multiple customers.
Again, you talk about staff, the cost, if you can figure out the cost and what the revenue is, you may justify that much easier.
That's right. And we plugged in some numbers, and Dave could speak to that if he's still on the phone. Looking at, we know what Todd makes, we know what some of the cost from a county administrator all the way down to all the people that would interact with the airports. And we came up with an estimate and a way to determine that what your cost would likely be. I don't know if Dave wants to speak on that. If he could hear us.
Dr. Byers, you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. I was just listening to the conversation. The revenues were easy to identify because you take, you do a pretty good job of identifying them as revenue centers. Cost centers, much more difficult, primarily because, as Daniel said, you're not set up each airport as a cost center. So that would be, and I think that was in the recommendations as well, is to get your accounting system set up so that you can start identifying what costs belong to which airport. The labor costs, I think, were probably the one that is hardest to identify because other than Todd, everybody else's time is allocated, some to the airport and some to all the other responsibilities that they carry, for the county. So I had set up a template to help identify what that allocation should be based on each department and how much time do they spend on airport business. So it could be from the county administration to legal. Accounting is probably one of the stronger departments that have a lot of interaction with the airport, and as well as like works with maintenance. So the idea that you can begin to identify what these departments cost the airport, and right now it's more of an internal number that nobody really knows. But once you start tracking that, you get a better sense of what it is costing you for essentially handling payroll, handling accounts receivable, accounts payable, journal entries, those types of things. And that's where the airport financial specialist would come in helping to organize a lot of those and begin to allocate where the expenses go. And then once you get some kind of an allocation estimate based on labor, the first one's just going to be, a swag, just to get an order of magnitude of how much time each, specific county employee spends on airport business. But then as you start tracking it, it becomes a much more accurate, accounting of what the labor costs are into each airport. So you're exactly right. We don't know that number exactly yet, but setting things up to start working in that direction, and that leads directly to that the question about enterprise funds. That essentially you have to know how much it's costing you before you can start identifying. Maybe that plugs into your rates and charges calculations. Like how much time do you spend on T-hangar maintenance versus what revenue that you're getting back from those. And so the large airports do that, and that's how they set landing fees. They keep track of how much it costs to operate the airport, and those costs are allocated back to, in this case, the airlines, and that's what sets their landing fees. This is done on a much smaller scale, obviously, but it still gives you a better sense of what is the county's contribution to the operation of each airport, and then you begin to understand, what investment you do have and what compensation you're getting back from that.
Thank you, sir. Which leads us right into goal number 3, which was to adjust the accounting system to allocate airport expenses to the cost centers for both airports. And it's exactly what we've been talking about, what Mark was concerned about. Anybody else have any comments on that? I think it's a good move. It's obviously something that we need to do in order for the commissioners to know exactly what it is they're spending on these airports. Because right now, it's something of an indeterminate amount. We know what a hangar costs. We know what Todd costs. We don't know how much of Danae's time to attribute to the airport, let alone anybody else in the county staff. And as we know, Danae is expensive. Very, very talented woman and charges appropriately.
Looks like she's not getting enough.
Yeah, it's never enough.
It's never enough. All right. Now we get to the FBO leases. I think we beat this to death to an extent earlier on. We need to renegotiate lease rates, whether we need to approach fair market value rates, or whatever approach we use. I think arguably we need to review them, have discussions with the FBOs, and see what's appropriate. Daniel, can you speak to the fuel flowage fee versus fuel-based fee?
Yes, sir. Currently at Inverness for Wright Rudder, it's a 5 cents per gallon. That's remitted from them back to the county only on fuel sales outside of their internal operation. So an example would be Mesa Airlines or any internal operations of theirs, you don't receive that 5 cents. So the goal would be is the tanks that are at that airport belong to the county, and it's part of the asset base that when you look at your appraised value, you're not capturing really, you're capturing 5 cents, but you're not capturing the revenue that you should. To make it cleaner, similar to our recommendation for Crystal River, is to remove, they don't have one by the way, but that 5% on top of the revenue, to remove those things and just have a flat rate, and where you would recoup those costs is a fuel-based fee of utilizing that tank, or as a management fee. So if they were to operate it and have parts for it, as it's currently written in the lease, that's how that would operate.
Okay, so as I understand it, just to read this back to you, Inverness pays you 5 cents for every gallon of gas they sell to other than themselves.
That's right.
And at the same, and Crystal River pays you nothing extra. You simply get 5% of every dollar earned above a certain point. And so you're proposing that the recommendation here is to have an FBO lease rate and then a separate fuel-based lease rate. But they would just be a monthly charge for the purpose of having the tanks and operating the tanks regardless of how much fuel gets sold.
That's right.
Okay. And is there, so obviously if the FBO sells a lot of fuel, an unusually large amount of fuel, they come out ahead. If they sell no fuel, they come out behind, the county comes out ahead. And is there a way to come up with an average of, does one set these fees based on some sort of average fuel sales, or how does that work typically?
Well, it could be, there's another function within airports called a minimum annual guarantee, or MAG. So guarantee that you're going to pay this amount. A lot of times with the MAG, it'll be any additional outside of that, there's a percentage. So there's a lot of ways that you could assess a fuel-based fee. It could be a base rate of how much the appraised value of that tank is. There's a lot of ways to do it. But
Any comments, questions, concerns? Charlie?
Well, I just was sitting there thinking about the poor condition of the one in Inverness. The ground and wire is just scattered across the ramp. People fall over it, and the hose is not in great shape, and I'm wondering how that, the FBO doesn't seem to feel responsible for it. So I'm wondering, at Crystal River, we were down for a long time because the pump was broken. So there's a maintenance issue there for that equipment that's probably not being addressed.
that's right. And in an effort to plan those capital items, as any business, you save your money, put it in the fund, and then you go buy a new one. But if you're not getting compensated for that tank, how are you going to buy a new one? And so the county and the taxpayers would have to foot the bill. And I know at Crystal River, you have one coming, a new installation, and then it's also on the capital improvement plan for Inverness to replace it. Really comes to removing the ambiguity in the lease, that if right now Brett Rudder's responsible for repairing or replacing certain components, that the county hold that operator responsible. And if it's the county's responsibility to replace hoses, because there is provision as if you're selling fuel to the public, the FAA requires that you inspect those hoses. You inspect the little reel that you take out and clip on your aircraft to keep it from blowing up. If that's laying out on the ground, is the integrity there? Is there not a split, a fray in it, where if the FAA were to come out and do an inspection of it, and Andy could attest to that, should be getting inspections on a regular basis. That's right. And so it really comes to the balance of who's responsible, and somebody needs to do it.
Did you have something for us?
Yes, sir. I just want to make a comment and everything with the far as what comes with the fuel tanks and the hose reels and the ground cable. I've been working with Wright Order for the past 2 years now. I'm now head of maintenance there. I've been fighting that issue for quite a while and fixing it. The largest problem we have since not having one there to operate the fuel system all the time is generally self-serve performances. That a lot of times, a lot of these issues are coming from other people coming in and not taking the time to either roll the hose up, or if there's an issue with the ground cable, letting someone know, wrapping it around the pole there, or stretching it to a point where the return spring for the roller becomes completely non-operational.
Right.
So that's honestly the biggest issue that's going on there, and it's been a continuous battle since I've been there.
Thank you. Anybody have any further comments on this? I think at the end of the day, it makes a lot of sense to me if it's possible to negotiate similar leases for each of the two FBOs. Treat everybody essentially the same way. I mean, they both have very, very similar business models. That would make sense. But whatever can be negotiated at the time. Anybody else have anything to add to this? Yes, sir.
Does the fuel for Mason, does the fuel for private customers come from the same tank? How do we validate the differences? One we're paying 5% on and we're collecting, the other one we're not.
It's my understanding, and Todd, correct me if I'm wrong, it's my understanding that Wright Rudder simply reports we sold to external customers 37,000 gallons last year, so here's how much we owe. It's self-reported.
Yeah, every month we do receive a detailed receipt.
Okay.
But you don't know how many gallons are being
You're
put
taken on.
into the tank.
Correct, we don't know.
Don't know that. We do know from Crystal Aero Group, we do know that amount, but not from Wright Rudder.
So again, does that go back to the way the lease was negotiated with the FBO in Inverness?
Precisely, yep.
So again, that.
No, well, part of it, the limitation on what you're eligible to receive, spirit of law, and Andy is abiding by the lease. James is going above and beyond. So James, when we ask for the information, here's all of it. Total fuel flowage, total amount of tank, how much fuel was put in the tanks versus what was remitted, because again, he doesn't pay 5 cents on it, so it doesn't matter. But Andy, we were limited in the amount of financial documents we were exposed to.
All right, so I'd like to kind of digress a little bit. Is this another key reason for the specialist? Would they be the person that would be responsible to identify the fuel flowage from each FBO?
Can be. Yeah, it could be a responsibility to know. And again, it's your tank. You really should know what's going in it. You should know that the inspection records are received and not just put in a desk or in a file folder on your computer, that you review them. Make sure that, when you look at the hoses, although you've delegated that responsibility out, you probably should do an inspection on a quarterly basis, monthly basis, to make sure that those provisions of the lease and responsibilities are being upheld. Same thing with tenant operators, albeit the FAA guidance on what you could keep in a hangar has changed dramatically recently. But that used to be a big component. Are there fire extinguishers? Do you have a flammable cabinet? Are you keeping cars in there? Is there an actual aircraft in there? Those functions, yes, they're delegated, but it's still your responsibility. If something were to go wrong, the risk ultimately falls back in some way back to the county.
So there's a dual responsibility, but ultimately it's the county.
Yes.
So it's incumbent upon the county to realize and take ownership of methods or methodologies to come up with a plan that's going to be consistent, that's going to be applicable to both, and accountable.
That's right. Yeah, it's hard to take one side and hold the FBO, and somebody said it, put it all on the shoulders of the FBO. That's not fair or equitable. But to make sure that if there's provisions in the lease that the county's responsible for something, you got to meet the timeline if you expect the FAA or FBO to meet the timeline. So if there's an incident on the field where somebody drives out and crashes through a fence, your lease says that you have X amount of days to issue notice to that FBO operator. But that didn't happen. So those are the things that having somebody there, if you have an event on your airport, somebody from the county should be there. That's how airports operate. Because if not, you're delegating too much risk to someone else, that at the end of the day, they're going to say, hey, the ambiguous language in my lease, it didn't say I was responsible for that. It's your airport. I've been down that road before.
Anybody else on this? Hangars, again, reappraising in 2027 for renewals and for new tenants, and Dr. Byers is recommending, quite frankly, coming up with a flat percentage by which rates would go up on an annual basis. Whether that's 2 or 3%, I heard both of those numbers thrown out. Again, it makes gives more certainty to tenants. On the other hand, if inflation happens to be 0 in a year and their rates are going up by 3% anyway, or vice versa, if inflation is 8%, they'll be very happy with only a 3% increase. Anybody have an issue with that?
That sounds unfair to me.
Unfair.
As you just pointed out, a escalator should be agreed upon, and whether it's a CPI or some other measure of inflation, agreed on. But just a flat rate doesn't seem right to me, because it's compounded. It's 2% on 2% on 2% on 2%, and it keeps on escalating. And aviation is expensive enough as it is. I think that it just seems unfair to me.
Yeah, and to comment on that, a lot of airports, different functioning, but number one, they have a lease policy. So not just for your current operators, but anybody that's interested in coming in, they get easily access to say, all right, this is how the base rate is determined. A lot of times you'll have, it could be attributed to CPI, but it's up to not to exceed, say, 3%. So if you have an 8% CPI one year, it's not going to go above 3%. If you have a negative CPI, a lot of those lease policies will say you have no increase. You're not going to retract. You're not going to take 3% off the base rate. You would just keep it that for that year, and next year reassess. So that way, again, the goal is to have equitable, fair, balanced. Starting to sound like Fox News, I'm sorry. Fair and balanced. You don't want to take money out of, don't take money out of the county's pocket, but don't take it out of theirs, especially if you have a year that nobody could foresee. Talk about you talk 20% in 3 years. There should be a limit to that amount, and it should. So you could do a flat percentage, or you could do up to and not to exceed 3%, 4%. Seen it both ways. But you're right. If it's a flat percentage without any concessions, we're doing 3% regardless. And you have a flat year or a down year, and you're still assessing 3%. It's not equitable. So again, that's where you get the minutia of the lease policy, and whether or not for larger facilities, anything above X amount of square feet, you got to get an appraisal. If it's a commercial building versus a private operator, how you deal with, you get an appraisal, they get an appraisal. If you don't agree, get a third-party appraisal, whether that person has to be registered as a certain type of appraisal versus, if they're doing comps on single-family residential homes, probably not comparable rates that you're going to get for an airport.
Yes.
Quick question. In your experience, since it's a supply and demand situation here, if we've got waiting for T hangars and all, is it profitable if we have available space, land area, for private enterprise to step up and say, we'll build the T hangars, put them in place, and let's do a land lease? I know from experience, I was on SunTrust board at banks. We did a lot of the financing of privately owned hangars and corporate hangars in that industrial park over there. That was a big business for us. And I don't know if we're promoting that in Citrus County, because if the demand's there, let's fill it with supply. And if we don't want to do it from the county standpoint and take the risk, private enterprise is probably willing to step up and say, you know what, there's an ROI there, we can make it happen.
For sure. And the last bullet kind of touches on that third-party hangar development. Your biggest return on investment in terms of revenue is building it yourself through legislative funding or FDOT funding. I've been in that situation where I had legislative funding, and it was for FedEx and UPS, and they said, well, you didn't pay to build this building. It doesn't matter. I'm still going to get a return on investment. So if you can't do that, that does take time, and you've got other projects already in the pipeline. You've got some programmed on your CIP, but absolutely, you're going to get a lower rate, And for a longer term, if you do a land lease with a private operator,
No risk.
there's no risk, yeah. They operate it, and there are reversionary clauses that after the lease term, 50 years, or that facility reverts back to the airport. But right, and they'll be able to accommodate, and depending on how that structure is, when we look at the lease terms and, if the FBO is remitting, if it's a flat rate, and somebody comes in and builds all this, you're just gonna get your land lease. So right now, that's about 17 cents square foot.
And can you comment on the concept of a 30-year land lease as opposed to some other term? I know we had some conversations about that over the past couple of years. And also then, what does Dr. Byers mean by condominium structure?
So I'll address that one first. Condominium is you'll have a large kind of rectangular box hangar and subdivided. Instead of like T hangars, they're actually box hangars. And so a developer, third party, would build that and then lease out, sublease out each of those parcels. So that's a condominium. And then in terms of the duration of the lease, that's a tricky one, but know it's coming. So in the past, you've had leases that have gone to the upward bound of 50 years. Florida legislator passed and updated Florida statute where it used to be no more than 25 years for your base lease. Now it is 50 years. So, and it should be dependent on the type of lease and the type of investment, that if you build the facility, the term of the lease should be less. If they build the facility, term of the lease should be more because they have to amortize and get back their return on investment. And so if you have a building, say an FBO, that the building is yours, that term of the lease, as it's currently structured, is appropriate. Every 5 years, it should be up for renewal, not to exceed probably 20, 25 years. But if it's not very often that you attach, if that FBO operator or some other operator is going to bring in capital and build a facility, they should be two separate agreements. There shouldn't be mutually exclusive because then you're leveraging this building, this capital asset, and if the FBO starts to perform poorly, they're tied to that building, and it's hard to separate those responsibilities.
Yes, sir.
So there should be a guideline established identifying one versus the other, right? So, I mean, if it's the county building it, then the lease is X. If you've got a third party that steps up and is willing to build, then there should be guidelines for that one as well. And now, did you say 20, 25 year, or what would be the maximum on something of that nature be?
Maximum, so for a private operator, 50 years would be the max. I would do, 20, 25-year base with options for 5 or 10-year extensions or renewals, up to 50 years. 50 years is the standard for a building if you're a third-party operator. Traditionally, not going to get any.
Sorry.
Go ahead, David.
I was going to say, I can speak to that. So the idea behind the recommendation is that, building T-hangers these days is a very, very expensive proposition. Even if you do get, aid from FDOT and, in some cases, even the FAA will participate. But it may not come fast enough or for you to, take care of all your other responsibilities, plus, the investment in the hangars. And, the condo hangar concept, it could be a single owner who wants to build his own hangar, like a box hangar, but it can also involve a third party that wants to build, like, say, a 10-unit T-hangar, and he sells the units, much like a traditional condo or apartment complex. So you deal with just the one third party, but you give him a long enough lease that he can get his money back, and so can the people who buy into the condo development. He gets a ground lease for, say, 30 years with the proper escalation in there, but he's got the responsibility for the facility. But eventually you'll end up owning it, when it reverts, when the lease expires, it reverts back to your ownership, and you can then lease them out to fair market value. So it's a way to encourage development. Understanding that you won't own the facility, and in some respects, they don't really compete with your other T hangars, because this is an ownership proposition. That at the end of 30 years, you may have a facility that's been kept up and has some residual value. In some cases, it may be a lost cause and you tear it down, and that would be a responsibility of the third party as well. Is at the end of the lease, either they turn the keys over to you, or they have a responsibility at your option to demolish the facility and return it to its former state. So it can work, like I said, with bulk hangars. They can buy into it. It can be T hanger units, or any kind of variation in between. And it's becoming more popular, primarily because it allows you to respond to this demand for hangar space, which is in some places is actually getting critical, and you'll see that by the rents that they're charging sometimes. So it's you may not have a policy regarding that now, but if somebody did come to you and ask about the possibilities, it may be something that the county's open to.
Thank you. Anybody else on this slide? Everybody good?
One quick question, why 30 years?
That's pretty much standard, although I'm working with an airport right now that's looking at extending that lease period in return for future rents. So essentially, you have the property, and these are mostly corporate hangar type developments, that 30 years is generally considered the standard, but because of the investment, you could probably go out to 50 years. And but that additional extension comes at a cost to the owner, that he pays up front the net present value of what the future rents would be. Mm-hmm. And that could be a considerable amount that essentially goes right to your, right back into the budget.
Okay.
In return for extending that lease. But I'd say start with a 30-year, and then you can consider the possibilities afterwards. And that, like I said, that seems to be the standard, that people can amortize out the investment in that period, and everybody walks away happy.
Okay, thank you.
Most lending institutions will require that 30 as a minimum, because if they're holding that as collateral, they want to know that that's a secure. That's why they'd like to go out to 50.
Anybody else?
I have a question on the slide.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
Sorry, I don't interrupt you. So regarding the third-party hangar development, if Daniel or Dr. Byer could kind of go into that on how that affects that $12 million or $13 million revenue number that they were looking at for Inverness. I mean, how much is that? To me, when you're developing these third-party hangars at 70 cents a square foot, how is that buying into that $13 million that we're trying to get to?
Daniel?
I don't think I understood the question. Could you repeat that?
Yeah, Daniel's got it.
I think I got it. So
He
that
thinks he has it.
from my understanding, looking at the slide in my head, 13 million was based off of land lease, right? So it's not buildings that you build. So if you were to build them yourself and you got money for free from the Florida legislature or FDOT, you're gonna make a lot more than 13 million a year. Does that answer the question? There you go.
Got it. Next, goal number 4, governance documents. So the idea here is to, we already have some minimum standards for operating at the airport. These are embodied in the FBO leases, the hangar leases, and a few various airport policies. But we don't have a single comprehensive set of rules. So the idea is to come up with a policies, procedures, and practices document that would have these various sections to it: general provisions, definitions, rules and regulations, minimum standards, which we already have, and development guidelines for future expansion and so forth. Comments on that from the board?
We need them.
We need them. Yeah. Anything to add to that, Daniel, other than you agree we need them?
Yes, to be able to accommodate the future, you need to establish a better foundation on which to grow on. And when you look at your leases and your contractual documents as you have, they're void of some of the standard language that you would see in leases precipitated by rules and regulations, minimum standards. So you should update those to incorporate changes in FAA policy, county policy, and be more, definitive on what the interpretation of that language is. Because again, right now, some of those provisions are, well, I think it says this, well, he thinks it says that. And it's easy to just say what it is, be clear, and that way you share responsibility. But yeah, my recommendation.
And this is, a document like this is something that the county could engage an enterprising gentleman such as yourself to provide?
Yep. Yeah, I think so. I mean, rules and regulations, they're somewhat standard, but there's some things in there when you talk about, you've probably read through them, some of them get into the legalese of how do you want that to apply to your airports. And so we regularly help airports develop these. We're doing one currently for Titusville for the 3 airports that they have.
Gotcha.
And a question I've got for you, David, is that in order to avoid one's interpretation, because we're not all experts in policy, would there be a responsible party that either the Aviation Board could reach out to for clarification purposes, so as not to place that burden on a county employee who may not be astute to the extent that needs to be? Can you elaborate on that for me?
Yeah, outside of your county attorney, if you needed expert guidance from legal, there are entities that provide that. There are airport aviation type attorneys. I mean, we could give advice, and we do often, on, at least the industry standard of what this interpretation should mean. And then in some regards, we can't. I mean, it really comes down to what are you willing to defend in your interpretation. We're going through that with the obstruction removal at Inverness. Our reading of Chapter 333 and the ordinance from the county, how does it apply, really comes down to what the county, how they intend to enforce that interpretation. Because that's going to have to stand up in court. But there are entities that can give you that.
Yeah. And usually there's due process as well. And that's written into that Part A, the general provisions. So, for instance, if there is a violation or something that needs to be addressed that could be, essentially codified, and this is something I think the county would adopt as, their policy. It could be, through an ordinance. But there would be a due process already identified that, maybe the first is a warning letter, then something a little bit stronger, almost to a point where, if you don't, clean up your act, you're going to be evicted, from the airport kind of a prospect. So, the idea behind all these is just to give you that guidance that, and you publish these so there's no surprises to anybody that this is how you want to operate each airport. And these are the guidelines. And, the other aspect of this is don't make them so onerous because, you have rules and regulations or other conditions. Essentially, you have to enforce those. Otherwise, you open yourself up to liability. So it's really a delicate balance, the things that you do want to have established established rules for, and, but it also gives everybody, a heads up that, this is what's expected of you in terms of how the county intends to operate the airports.
James?
What is the relationship between these documents or difference with the airport master plan?
Yeah, so the master plan identifies forecasted growth or the potential for forecasted growth with the FA's terminal area forecast and, market conditions. And it really doesn't touch on business standards and how to operate, what your rules should be, what you can and cannot do, what the expectation of an operator is. And that, it's not just on your base tenants, it will be applied to itinerant pilots. If you step on the airport, if you operate on the airport, this is what you're responsible to do.
So in essence, the master plan is, this is what the airport is going to look like 5, 10, 20 years from now.
Yep.
And the governance documents are, here's how you're going to behave.
And now the master plan can incorporate, if those existed, the master plan would acknowledge those things. So development guidelines, if you said, we're not going to build a hangar under 10,000 square feet, the master plan would acknowledge that.
Questions, comments? One final goal, and that is to prepare and promote aeronautical and non-aeronautical property to attract new businesses. And obviously, this is part of the return on investment that the county hopes to get from these airports. Dr. Byers already talked about how important and valuable non-aviation business can be. We see that in Brooksville all over the place, with all of the corporations that rent space, rent land, rent buildings from the Brooksville Airport. And so we're talking about a marketing plan for the Inverness Business Park. We're talking about development guide for prospective tenants. And bottom line, look to see what other vacant property there might be around the various airports and see what the county might consider trying to acquire and develop into further rentable property, rentable space. Any comments on that?
Yeah, I'll take it from the top. For establishing a marketing plan, I know I read in the Chronicle the other day that the county hired a marketing firm to undertake what the county has to offer. And so a lot of entities are going through that, but to attract outside companies such that would be able to establish an operation at Inverness Airport at the business park, it's going to take a marketing effort. So you're not just marketing the runway length, the property, you're marketing the community, the workforce, the roadways, the infrastructure, all those things. And so putting together essentially a certified type of site. I know Duke Energy does certified sites, and they give grants for that. And so certifying the business park and creating a portfolio that you could go and market, I think is instrumental in making sure that you attract the right audience. Because anybody and everybody's going to want to operate out there, but to try to attract the commercial global type of companies, they're going to want incentives, tax breaks, all things that are beyond the purview of our airport manager, right? So it becomes all the things that need to be baked into that marketing plan before you put an ITN out or invitation to negotiate. If you have vacant property, you want people to know it's leasable, but what comes with that? What are the conditions? So that's part of the marketing plan. Not just, hey, we have 70 acres of available property, come and get it. And so that's that in a nutshell. Developmental guide, making sure you have continuity in the brand and the look of the airport, I think is important because when they invest their money, these companies that come and invest their money, they want to make sure that they're not building their multi-million-dollar house in a neighborhood that's going to crowd. And so making sure you have a guideline so that every hangar or facility that's built abide by the standards. And that's from all modes of of infrastructure, the roadways, the access roads, the lighting, the signage. It all goes into that brand that you should create if you're trying to attract $13 million of revenue a year. And the last one, reevaluating vacant property. There's a lot of discussions and everybody has their opinion. What you should do in the business park, what you should do, I've heard developing like microgreens facility. It's a crazy idea. Also heard storage units. We put that on the, put that aside. Maybe in 50 years, if it's still vacant.
You
might
forgot
wanna-
car washes.
Waffle House, that's mine. Hey, there's not a single Waffle
Not a
House in
single
Citrus County. Just letting y'all know, I think it would do well. There is a Huddle
There is a
House.
Huddle House.
There is a Huddle. I asked him one day, "What's your favorite restaurant?" I said, "Waffle House." I'm like, "Well, gonna have to travel out of the county for that." Okay. But vacant property, it's critical that you evaluate the best and highest use of what that property is. So whether it's a school, right? So a school, when you talk about lease rates, those are the type that get 99-year leases for $1 a year. It's just that return on investment back to the county is not as good. Is it a social value? Absolutely. Because as we know, we have not enough flight instructors, not enough mechanics. So to keep this airport vibrant, you do need those things. So evaluating what current property you have, but also new property. If you look at toward the south of the business park, 500-something acres, and there's discussions of, not that it's happening, but possibility of expanding the airport out south. But then toward the east, you have a property owner that they're not going to sell. So, and the same thing with Crystal River. I mean, part of the runway extension is moving east into the golf course, but to be considerate of your neighbors, how far do you move and not impact them? And one thing that we looked at when you're extending the taxiway just north of where that property would be, is it's somewhat wetland area, but it's vacant. So what's to say if the part of the negotiation with the landowner for the golf course is, it becomes airport property, and that person could be a third-party operator where they build the hangars, but you still own the property. Because what they want is a through-the-fence operation, which the FAA is not likely going to allow. And so that's what the emphasis there is, to make sure for non-aeronautical property, that's where you're going to get your biggest bang for your buck. Because again, they have to pay for fair market value. If you put it out on the street and say, we want $400 a month for this T-hanger, the guy says, look, I'm only willing to pay $300. No one else comes, well, then you could lease it to him for $300. But if it's non-aeronautical, if it says it's $1,000 for that area, that's what it has to be. And so you're likely going to get more money from non-aeronautical. And if there's an attachment to an actual aeronautical, even though it's non-aeronautical, like in the business park, if an aeronautical operator came in, you could reclassify that, but they still could pay fair market value if there was a connection. So looking at unique places, especially at Crystal River, you're landlocked, right? You've got roadways and a park and wetlands, not much. Could you be like a Brooksville? Probably not. You're not going to have 2,000 acres out there, but you could selectively choose some properties, and the same thing with Inverness.
Thank you.
That's it.
Comments? Objections? That's it? Thank you very much. So, bottom line, guys, the goal now is to think some more about it this month, and when we meet again in April, we'll entertain a resolution to adopt these for ourselves, at which point, as recommendation to the BOCC, at which point we'll present that to the county commissioners at the aviation workshop that they have planned. Daniel, thank you so much. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing, excuse me, Dr. Byers, thank you again for your time. I hope you feel better soon.
Yeah, I just didn't want to spread this out to you guys. I wouldn't wish it on anybody.
It's the gift that keeps on giving, isn't it?
But I'll see you in the next round.
All right, sounds good. Take care.
All right, bye now.
Do you have something on this subject?
No, not necessarily. Well, kind of, I guess. I just have some questions.
Well, could we ask you to wait until the next open to the public section, which is right toward the end of our meeting?
Oh, sure, sure. I
Thank
thought
you.
you were trying to wrap it up there. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay.
No, we have
Okay.
plenty more, unfortunately. Folks, thank you so much for your patience through all this. We've got the rest of our agenda to go, which hopefully will not take very long at all, because they're typically, yep, we're working on it. Todd?
Stole my thunder. Moving on to hangars. Inverness has 16 T hangars, 0 vacancies, 21 are waiting. Crystal River has 20 T hangars, 0 vacancies, 22 are waiting. And then Crystal River has 2 box hangars, 0 vacancies, 6 are waiting. And just to let you know that we do have in the budget this fiscal year for another row of T hangars.
Okay. At which airport?
Crystal River.
Crystal River.
Yep. That would be the 3rd row. So I've talked with FDOT to make sure that that grant's lined up. Their fiscal year starts July 1st. Our fiscal year starts October 1. So really just making sure the grant and everything is moving. So the idea is that when you hit October 1, you should be
And how
able
many
to put
T
out.
hangars are in a row?
It depends, but 10.
10? Great. County Commission updates, piggyback rides.
Yeah, that's in a couple weeks. FDOT's piggyback agreement for Inverness's repavement, marking, runway, taxiway, and aprons.
Wonderful.
One of those things where the work's gonna take a lot less than the actual, okay.
Major status reports?
All right, Crystal River Runway 927 extension. The pre-EA has been completed. It's with the FAA now. I'm hoping that the review is less than 30 days, but it can be like a black hole over there, so I'm preparing for 90. With that review, I can't remember if I mentioned it last time, but there's no significant impacts that I've noticed and that my consultants notice as well that's going to prevent us from moving forward with a formal EA or the construction of this runway extension. But can't say anything until I get their final. And then, yes, of course, after the pre-EA, we'll move on to a formal EA. And then during that process as well, the county's preparing a rebid package for design, which should be going out soon. Right now, it's with Public Works, and we're just dotting our i's and crossing our t's.
Great. Fuel tanks?
Fuel tank replacement at Crystal River. County is drafting an advertisement, and it goes to legal, Public Works for their review before the advertisement. And then hopefully soon, we can start moving on construction.
Wetland removal?
This project is basically complete, 98%, 99%. It's, all the data is with the FAA. It's under review, and this data was a part of the runway extension at Crystal River. And nothing to report from that either,
Okay.
which is a good thing.
Next.
Inverness airspace study, obstruction removal. Daniel did touch on it a little bit. The project is on hold until further direction, but really it's, we need to talk with the city of Inverness. And now that my old boss is now the assistant city manager, hopefully keep that warm connection and try to work on how to tackle this off-airport obstructions. There's a lot of trees that are poking into our airspace, about over 1,500 of them. And just trying to negotiate that path. And like Daniel mentioned about Chapter 333, just want to be careful about how we go across doing this. And with that being said, that moves us into a master plan for Inverness. It's due this fiscal year, and I have money budgeted for that. But also luckily for me is that I still have FAA bill entitlement funds. Of quite a lot, actually, and this will be able to cover for this master plan. So this would be another grant, 98-2, so the county is only going to be required to put in about $10,000 for this grant, which is great. It saves us a lot of money, about $330,000 worth, something like that. So I'm happy about that. So moving forward with that, I have an FA pre-app. Haven't heard anything yet. When I do, I'll let you know.
Okay.
All right, Inverness Business Park is 90% complete. I'm working with SECO still on an easement. We just got the easement language back from staff, and there's no objections, so I'm going to be working with them and try to get them out there as quickly as we can to get electricity to our business park. We're also reviewing sinkhole remediation quotes. We've gotten 4. And besides that, most of the punch list that's left with that park has been completed. So it's just that last 10% of any project. It just seems to be tough to get over that hill. But we're pointing in the right direction. That grant, by the way, is through Florida Commerce. Its expiration is June 30th of this year. It's already had 2 extensions. I'm hoping that we don't have to extend anymore, but hopefully we'll be done. But if we need to, I'll have to make that call. Phase 2 of the business park, grant is still in discussions. We've had this grant, we've had the state appropriation since July 1 of last year, and it's gone through a lot of back and forth with Florida Commerce, approximately 4 times, actually. It's taken a long time, but I'm kind of glad that we're looking at this carefully. Just making sure that we don't miss anything. And now that we have a new public works director, I want him to take a look at it as well before this hits the streets, so. Oh, okay.
Okay, corporate hangar?
Yep. Yeah, a work authorization is under review with Director of Public Works.
I'm sorry. Okay. Sorry.
Oh,
Corporate hangar?
Yeah, corporate hangar, the work authorization is under review with the Director of Public Works.
Okay.
Inverness repavement and marking, that's to the board, and again, hope as soon as that gets signed, get a PO, the job will take only a few weeks. Airport signage and landscaping, I don't want to say that we're waiting on a scope of work. Scope of work has been drafted for this project a couple times, but it's also been kicked back and forth, additions, other parts around the county as well, signage in particular, some landscaping. Still in discussions with other people in the county to make sure that there's no more comments, questions, concerns. I'd like to get a scope of work out and get this moving quickly as I can.
Right, right. All right, minor projects.
Inverness AWAS replacement, waiting for FAA grant agreement. I thought I was going to hear something by late February, but I still have not heard anything, even though I've been asking. But that'll be under bill entitlement as well. And that project is expected to cost under $150,000. Inverness Clean and Paint M hangers, waiting for the RFQ for that. That's being developed. That goes with any, same thing I've been saying the past few months, anything to do with paint. When it comes to maintenance, just waiting for that. Replacing the deck and ramp at the old FBO. I know that they've been asking about this for a while. I'm still waiting from design from our continuing contractor. I have money ready to go to build this metal ramp. As soon as we get that, we can get moving. And then the awning. Still waiting for a quote for Daly and Zilch. And that's it.
Still waiting for the quotas, and
Yep.
they just keep,
I've called, I've asked. I'm going to move on.
all right, fair enough. Well, thank you. Any presentations we have to listen to? Not that I'm aware of. Airport security? Anything to report? The airports are secure then, are they?
Yes.
Good. Anything with communicating to the board, the BOCC, other than what we've talked about up to this point?
I have my notes here. Vote on, the plan is for this financial study is what we just discussed today. And then the tentative next meeting is April 4th. I'll have to
Right.
vote on that. But the idea is that you guys have your vote for that day, and then it'll go to the BOCC May 14th in the morning for a workshop, and then later on in the afternoon for vote. That's the
Okay.
plan as of right now.
Subject to change.
There you go.
Yes, ma'am. Your turn.
My name is Dee Johnson, and I've been a resident of Citrus County for 20 years, the first 15 in Crystal River on the water, and the second 5 years about 2 miles from the airport in Inverness. And had issues with both, but my question is, what is the actual vision for this county in the long run, say another 20 years? What is Citrus County going to look like?
It's going to be a welcoming, economically vibrant community.
I'm glad you pointed that out, because, I mean, are we going to be another Spring Hill, Brooksville?
I'm sorry?
Which one?
Is this, well, it's kind of like run together.
Just about, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think some of Spring Hill is in Hernando County, some in Citrus County, right?
No, it's all.
No,
here.
it's all
It's all,
here.
no, it's all
Okay,
over there,
okay.
yeah. Is that what we're going to look like?
You know, I don't even know what they look like. I've never been down there.
You've never been
I've
down
been to
there?
Brooksville. I've not been to Spring Hill.
Okay, busy. And the reason I'm asking is because this does say, people and nature live in harmony. And our lives are being impacted by a lot of this growth. The infrastructure is not here to sustain the growth that we have now, let alone any future growth. We have no new schools being built, is that correct, that I'm aware of? Our hospital, our main hospital, does not even have a NICU. If you don't know what that is, that's a neonatal intensive care. I have a daughter that's delivering in April, and she is high risk, and I don't know what's going to happen with that. So just, you know, it takes me 3 months to get a doctor's appointment with an orthopedic, and they have 7 doctors. It's just, the structure is not here to support the growth that I'm seeing. And another question I have is, who benefits mainly from the airports? Like, I know the county uses it, the sheriff's department uses it for their helicopters because they come, their flight pattern is right over my house. But who else uses the airport? Is it mainly?
So, I mean, obviously outside of civilians, us as normal people.
Okay.
The Coast Guard does operate in and out of the Crystal River Airport on a fairly regular basis with their helicopters. As you say, the Sheriff's Department operates out of Inverness. Live Wire is a company that operates helicopters. I believe Alonda can speak to that if we need more details out of Inverness. Those are the businesses currently, the commercial operations that come in and out. Everything else is either folks around here that would like to learn to fly, that would like to rent an airplane because they already have learned to fly and just go out and tootle around, or maybe fly to Leesburg for a $100 hamburger.
Right.
And then, of course, others that fly in here, whether it be for vacation or simply students building time, fly in and out of various airports, you know, to build their hours while they're working on their ratings.
Okay. So this runway is to make access to larger airplanes like corporate planes? Where are they going and coming from? And why are they here?
These corporate airplanes would be coming from various other cities in the U.S. basically coming here primarily for vacation, bringing folks that have a lot of money and can charter airplanes into Citrus County to swim in the manatees, stay in our hotels, go fishing, that sort of thing. And the runway extension will allow a somewhat larger class of these corporate jets to be able to legally land and take off here at the Crystal River Airport.
Okay. Is there such a thing as a saturation of tourism for this county? When we lived on the water, we could wake up every morning to anywhere from 5 to 10 boats in our backyard.
Right.
And 100 people swimming in the water behind our house while we're trying to have a cup of coffee on our deck.
Right. First of all, my apologies. I'm not equipped to answer these kinds of questions.
I just want to know what the future looks like. Are we gearing this to get more tourism and
Industrial base.
industrial?
You're looking at, that's what your business park is, okay? Is to bring jobs and training and education and, aviation-related businesses into the area.
Okay.
You have no industrial operations in this county of any significance. So if you're not going to, where are your children going to work when they graduate?
Well, where are these children going to go to, these people that are coming are going to have children and families, where are they going to go to school? Our schools are already to capacity.
That's the schools and the county's responsibility to plan. But it's not the board, it's not this board.
I understand. That's why I'm trying to figure out why the airport is needing to grow to bring in more business, and where are these people going to go?
Right.
I just got involved with going to these meetings and things within the last year, so I'm trying to learn.
I'd like to just make one mention about extending this runway too, and just like with Inverness, that also opens up for emergency response. So if you have a hurricane, that allows that state, and trust me, Florida Department of Transportation, they know what runways they can use, they can go to drop off supplies, and it's more vital than you think.
I know.
So
I lived through Hermine. We had 3 feet of water in our house, so
Well,
main reason
I
why
feel
we
for
went.
you, but I know it's a great staging area for any type of quick emergency response.
Okay.
That's my idea.
What?
Let me address your school. You had a school question here quickly. I sit on the long-range planning committee for the school board. Our school capacities are more than we need right now. Here's why. We're seeing more and more homeschooling happening. We're finding students are pulling out into homeschooling out of our public school systems. So therefore, we're getting vacancy rates in our schools right now. And then we are planning for new schools coming up, but we're having to be very selective just in some specific areas.
Okay.
Is it happening? The other part is the industrial park will support commercial growth, which is that ad valorem tax dollars that come in on those multi-million-dollar companies that come in there help support the infrastructure, the roads, the water, the sewer for us individuals that are out there have homes without putting the burden of us on ad valorem taxes. So that it is a positive effect and it creates jobs.
All right. When I first moved to Inverness 5 years ago, it took me 22 minutes to get from my home, which is close to the airport, to downtown Crystal River. It now takes me 42. So the roads are not, they're not there now, so,
Right.
And traffic is crazy.
Obviously, we see roads being widened. We see various improvement projects going on. I think they're taking longer than any of us would like. And I've seen the same sort of thing. We've been here since my wife and I since '96.
Well,
So
they're still working on 19, and that's.
they're
not
still
even
working on
close to
19.
being-
They're working on 491. Yep,
Yeah.
I know what you mean.
Okay, I'm just trying to get an idea of what
Yeah.
the plan is.
All right.
I know you guys aren't the county commissioners. I've tried to
Gotcha.
go to those meetings too. I do want to say something about a lease term.
Okay, hang on one second. Yes.
I just wanted to help her out a
Yeah.
little bit. So the website, you can find a lot of information on that. the BOCC website, as well as the YouTube channel. They have been doing videos of updates on projects, things like that. So that would give you a little more insight to the overall questions that aren't maybe specifically aviation, as well as if you're able to watch, which you can watch online or even attend and post some of your questions at the regular BOCC meetings. But we do have resources online as well that could maybe help answer some of those questions for you.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
As far as lease terms, on the lease for those, have you guys ever leased anything? Is that verbiage in there that says subject to a percentage change every year, every time you renew? I mean, I used to manage apartment complex. We didn't have anything like that in the lease that, hey, we're gonna jack your rent up.
Right,
this-
so
this increment-
these are leases to the two businesses that are there. One of the businesses has a flat monthly lease rate. The other business chose and requested something more flexible, and so they have a lower base and then a percentage of the revenues on top of that.
But I thought you were talking about the hangar rate.
No, not the hangars. What the hangars have are just potentially, they have essentially automatic rate increases each year. So just like an apartment complex, my wife and I own a number of houses, and every year, I mean, we don't have automatic rate increases, but every year the lease comes up. And it's like, okay, let's work together with a tenant to come up
Right,
with.
but it's not written in the lease that it's
It's
gonna
not
happen
written in the
every-
lease, no.
Oh,
No.
okay. All right.
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
Yeah,
are you talking about your
yeah,
properties or
yeah.
the county's?
My property.
Your
No,
property.
we're talking about, like hangars and stuff, that's all,
Yeah.
got a CPI stuff in it, that's why we got into the CPI issue.
Yeah, instead of
That's
having,
all, that's, those
You're,
are
you're
separate.
you're misunderstanding what she and I were just talking
Oh.
about. She and I were talking about the houses and apartments.
A
that we
lease
own
in
and rent out.
general about anything.
Yeah,
You lease
yeah.
a car, you know, is it
mhm.
in, I've never leased a car, so I don't, other than,
Yeah.
you know, just a vacation type
Right.
thing, but.
Yeah, the hangars, those contracts have these annual rate increases built in.
Okay. Is there any plan for any type of like a development that has, we used to live in Lake City and you had an air park that had houses with hangars? You know, like that was in your backyard. You flew in on the strip, it was a grass
Right,
strip.
right.
Small,
There are currently
small.
no plans to do that at either of the two airports.
Not at the airport, but in general in the county.
Not that I'm aware of, no.
All right, okay, thanks.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to volunteer to add a couple of things you had offered this information.
Please.
The 5,000 feet runway extension, not necessarily we're bringing a larger aircraft in. It added the safety margin to the current operating, which we already have that over there. So that's one item I want to clarify. Second, we see a lot of the airlift, the emergency meds operating at the airport. A lot of time they're coming in the evening time when the public is not there. We have to open the gate, we have to offer them some help. So I've been observing that for the first hand. The airport is really part of the infrastructure. Third, I want to extend my invitation to you to come to the airport. I'll give you a tour to show them. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have something from Right Rudder? Okay, yes, ma'am.
Okay, I just wanted to note the significance of the wetlands that are behind the airport and the golf course. That's the reason the golf course ended up closing, was because of the flooding issues. So much so that there are certain homes in our community now that have been adjusted to now being in a floodplain. So there are significant flooding and wetland in our community. And it's concerning for us that if the airport extension is done and that land is raised, the flooding is going to come into our community, which we've seen with the runway expansion, where Flight Path, where Diane lives on, now has a pond, a year-round pond that wasn't there before. So there's been significant flooding issues with the expansion, and we're also concerned with the extension. So with the nature evaluations, are there human evaluations to this as well, or is it just it's going through and now we have to suffer the
No, they're-
consequences of it.
Oh, yes, they are.
Have those been done?
Not yet.
When will those be done?
I
And
don't have
wh-
an exact date or time, but
Well, I mean, are they projected in the next few months? Like, what are we to expect on that? Like, what kind of studies are they gonna come and, like,
well,
what kind of studies pertain to those people studies?
like a public outreach.
Yeah.
No, she's asking about the impact
Sure,
of the
part of the-
runway extension, what it will have on the communities, on the houses.
Well, during the pre-EA that's been conducted, one was a cultural resource and making sure there's no, like I've said before, no bones, pots, anything
Right,
like.
yeah, nothing
There's no
archaeological.
graveyard, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But they'll also look at wildlife as well, and
Right.
then an economic impact that's been reviewed.
So the economic impact showed no impact to the community that it'll be affecting?
I don't know if I'd word it like that. There isn't an impact, there is an impact.
Right.
But I think whenever I was looking at it, it was, are you making sure that there's not a nest of bald eagles that are gonna have to be
Right.
removed?
Well,
or-
saying that, there is.
There-
We have bald eagles and
Absolutely.
gophers and stuff
Yep.
in that community, so along with the people, we're also concerned about them.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, so, but I guess that's my question is, when the human aspect of the studies and stuff are going to take place.
If you don't mind,
Oh, of course.
Daniel asked you to comment on that, since I'm doing a poor job.
So to add, you're going through the phase one, what the FAA wants to see is you have a year-long timeframe to get this EA done. So you do the pre-work, identifying over 20 different categories, animals, so they call bugs and bunnies,
Yeah.
trees, wetlands, but also socioeconomic. So on many different facets, and there's a component of public outreach. And so you may not have undertaken the official public outreach yet, because that really doesn't start until the EA clock starts. So I would advise either you're affected by being a landowner or a neighbor or just a citizen of Citrus County, voice your opinion for or against the project, because the FAA is going to review that, and there are clarifiers that, look, if there are no impacts to any of those categories, feedback in of itself usually doesn't tip the scales, but situation in Inverness with the tree removal, that's the heaviest consideration is how are you going to impact the landowners? And so second to that, if you're taking any previously impervious land, which would be considered wetlands, and you're replacing with something, the Water Management District, Southwest Florida Management District, requires you to go through a pretty extensive evaluation of if the water can't go there because that's where your taxway and runway is going to go, where is it going to go? So you either have to develop a drainage retention area like you have at the business park, or some type of conveyance structure so that it doesn't go in people's property.
Right. That neighborhood back there already has, for years and years, has had a flood issue when the rains were hard. A friend who used to live there, and her whole yard would flood, all the way up, the whole yard. Yeah, she was on Admiral Road, so she was not even,
Just with the runway expansion, the widening, we've already seen that, so that's just, concerning for us as being part of that community, and the homes on the golf course, so.
When ultimately, it's, the approval of the EA rests with the FAA. They have to issue a finding of no significant impact. In a project of this nature, you shouldn't run into it, the county shouldn't run into much issue getting it pushed forward, but it's, long road ahead with the year of evaluations.
So that has just begun.
As I recall,
The formal has not begun yet, but the pre-EA that's been completed.
So once that's completed and the FAA approves it, that starts the one-year process?
They have 1 year. I'm hoping it's less than that, but yeah, they have 1 year to complete their environmental assessment. Yep.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public?
Just have one last question, which may or may not, this is about signage. Do you know what it would take to get a sign for our EAA chapter up there, like permanent, so more people know that we're there and that we're part of the community and that we're open to the public? Because right now, most people don't even know we exist unless, they're kind of looking for us.
Do you mean like a roadway sign? or-
Something like, there's that learn to fly sign there, right, as you
Sure.
turn it, but just something that people are like, hey, there's an official meet chapter here, it's aviation, it's open to the public, and that way they know we exist. It's just something that we've been trying to, we haven't really dug too deep into it, but I'm just bringing it up here so we can kind of get that conversation going.
You're talking to the right person. I'll add it to the list.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
No problem.
And Barry, you folks are this Saturday, like day after tomorrow?
Yes, that's
9
correct.
o'clock.
Yes.
Will there be food?
Yes, there will. There is.
I went your
Yes.
last meeting on Saturday, and a great group of people. It's good to see a nice, positive aviation community.
Yeah,
So,
and that's part of what we're trying to do is get people to understand that we're here for the public. It's not just a bunch of closed group. It's anybody who wants any interest in baby. And we're starting to get some more youth in, but we don't have a good youth program yet. And that's what we're trying to work on is get that so we can do that outreach. And Young Eagles is part of it, but we also want to do things like Umatilla has a build project where they do an RV 12, and they work with the local high school over a 3-year project to help to build those skills. And it's also a big confidence builder for these kids when they can say, yeah, I built an airplane. And so that's part of what we're trying to do with our community is do something more like that. Of course, building an airplane, you need a hangar, and that we don't have right now. So one step at a time, though. Thank you.
Just want to let it be known, there's not a chance that I would ever go up in an airplane that I personally built, but wow. Anything more from the public? Seeing none, members of the AAB, you may have noticed that there's a proposed change to our normal second Thursday of the month schedule. Next month, because we have to talk some more about this presentation, and I really wanted to be there, and I'm not available the second Thursday of April. Would everybody be okay with meeting the first Thursday of April, that is to say, April 4th?
Yes.
Good. I don't think it requires a resolution. There's nothing in the bylaws that says we have to meet on the second Thursday. I read through them. It's just what we commonly do. It just says that whenever we meet, it's got to be at least once a month.
Yes.
And it's
Yes.
got to be published
Yes,
publicly.
correct.
All right. So our next meeting is Thursday, April 4th, 2 p.m., right here in this very chamber.
So we don't have to vote? Is that what you said?
Correct.
You okay with that, Danae?
Whatever you want, I
Oh, you're sweet.
try.
With that, and if there's nothing else, I hereby declare this meeting of the AAB to be adjourned.
Wait, I think we have to vote on that though, right?
Darn it.
Tried to get away with it again.
You're a new chairman.
You
I
know,
can only give you one.
Yeah.
I can give you one per meeting.
I'm only going to be a dictator. No. May I have
I
a
moved it
motion to
closed.
adjourn? Somebody moved and somebody seconded. Those in favor? Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.